Chapter 343. Chu Feng was moved. He really wanted to ascend the altar, but he knew it wasn't that simple. The suppressive might here was too strong. Even an evolved being at his level would feel stifled and suffocated just by approaching it. The entire altar was vast and majestic. It was like an ancient city towering in front of them. The various offerings on the jade table at the very top were glowing brilliantly. At this time, someone let out a low roar and rushed forward. After approaching the altar, he directly charged up the stone step. In the end, he was actually suppressed to the point where blood flowed from the corner of his mouth and his body was trembling. Thump! In the end, that person tumbled down. His body was trembling, his spirit was unstable, and his face was pale. Now all the experts were envious. Who wouldn't be tempted after seeing the items on the altar? Let me. Another person took large strides and wanted to ascend the altar. Even Bodhi Biogenetics' old monk, Master Qianjia, whose body was covered in a faint golden glow, was moved. If even this old monk was like this, there was no need to talk about the others. The temptation here was too great. What were those things? The golden seal, the 9 cauldrons, the cinnabar fruit, all of them were too astonishing. For instance, the bright red peaches of immortality. Even though so many years had passed, they were still flowing with scarlet radiance. Even the old Taoist was drooling. These things were rare treasures to evolved beings. Legend has it that during ancient times, before the earth had completely declined, evolved beings would hold a banquet of immortality peaches to enjoy these rare treasures. Some of these fruits bloomed once a year, while others bloomed once every 10 or 100 years. There were even some that bloomed once every 3,000 years. Naturally, the rumored mother tree had been withered for many years. Perhaps only during the most prosperous era of the earth, when it was ranked 11th in the cosmos, would it be full of vitality and fruits. Peaches of immortality, something only the immortals of ancient times could enjoy. Even the legends of the Queen Mother of West mention this fruit. Someone sighed with eyes full of passion. Unfortunately, they could only watch but couldn't ascend the altar. Brother Chu Feng, do you have a way? You're the most powerful domain researcher on Earth. Only you can lead us up. Someone spoke, looking at Chu Feng, revealing a hopeful expression. Chu Feng shook his head and explained patiently, there's really no other way. This place isn't just a problem with the domains. The most important thing is the imposing manner of the mountains and rivers. The ancient people offered sacrifices to the heavens, giving this place an aura that suppresses the world and suppresses all experts. He told everyone that, strictly speaking, there were no destructive domains here at the moment. Everyone could climb the altar and enjoy the offerings. Only, the aura of heaven and earth here was too terrifying. At the very top of the altar was a place close to deities, and there was a certain type of solemn and grand power. So. At this moment, some people moved. It wasn't that they trusted Chu Feng, but that they had received orders and had no choice but to climb up. They were responsible for exploring this place. The major corporations and top-grade powers had sent a fair number of troops, and each of them had more than one king-level expert. Some of them were in charge of scouting the way. Unfortunately, when these people approached the altar, they were all obstructed. When they climbed up the stone steps, it was as if they were carrying a mountain on their backs. Their bodies were all hunched over, and their foreheads were covered in sweat. In the end, all of them let out muffled groans. Some staggered back, some coughed up blood, and some fell down like rolling gourds. There were some things Chu Feng didn't say. This so-called power could be considered a domain, but it could also be viewed as one. It wasn't created by carving runes on magnetic stones. This kind of power directly guided the power of the mountains and rivers, condensing the energy of the earth veins and famed mountains, and communicating with the field of heaven and earth. Only in this way could a complex field energy be formed. This kind of thing could be broken, but it required a domain master to take action. They could also not break it and treat it as a domain. They could simply resist this power and climb the altar directly. It didn't have any transformations and was very simple. There was no lightning, wind, or fire. It only suppressed all approaching creatures and made them feel as if they were being suppressed. Brother Chu Feng, is there really no other way? Someone from the corporations asked. He was too unwilling to accept this. The offerings weren't very far away, but they couldn't be reached. Chu Feng shook his head and said, "My cultivation is too low. I definitely can't move this altar." Everyone, think of a way. He's right. Everything here depends on one's own strength. Whoever can obtain the fortune will depend on their own luck, said the old Taoist. Everyone, get out of the way. It was at this time that the half-burned old woman suddenly moved. She rose into the air and pounced toward the stone steps of the altar in an attempt to break free from the soft collapse. Swoosh, 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 her movements were extremely fast. She wasn't really flying in the air, but rather using her hands to touch the ground and rapidly climb up. Even she couldn't sit still. She faced the offerings on the altar and wanted to take the risk to snatch them. That was because she saw the mutant fruit man in the jade container. It was snow-white and sparkling like a ginseng fruit. Her heart was stirred up because that was a heaven-defying item. She felt that if she ate it, she would be able to regenerate her broken body. Her strength would increase by leaps and bounds, and she would be able to evolve continuously. The old woman's strength was extraordinary. No one had expected her to be able to climb up as if she were walking on flat ground even after being burned so badly. Chi. At the most critical moment, her palm glowed as she shot out a strange object. It was a jade ladder and wasn't very big at all. It was no bigger than a palm. However, this small ladder was glowing and blossoming with runes. It extended along the stone steps of the altar as if it were paving a path. This was extremely bizarre. What is this thing? Everyone was shocked. The old woman followed the light emitted by the jade ladder and climbed up the steps at lightning speed. She could actually climb up? Everyone's eyes turned red. "The heavenly ladder!" the old Taoist cried out. Chu Feng's heart was moved. He had learned from the stone carvings at the bottom of the sea that there were domain masters who could create such an item. They could use the terrain of famed mountains as if they were walking on flat ground. A domain researcher who had reached this level was extremely terrifying. "No, it's only a low-level product and an embryonic form," muttered the old Taoist. Apparently, the old woman was going all out. Using such an item to charge into a famed mountain was truly astonishing. Chu Feng frowned. The old woman definitely didn't have this item with her last time at Mount Zhijin. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been in such a miserable state. He was observing in secret, wondering if the old woman would be able to use the heavenly ladder to cross over after he laid down the domain. Crack! Suddenly, the jade ladder in the old woman's hand cracked and the radiance it was emitting dissipated. The old woman let out a muffled groan and fell down from the altar. It was as if a powerful force had smashed into her body, suppressing her all the way down until she fell with a bang at the foot of the altar. The item in her hand had been destroyed and she couldn't cross over. Chu Feng nodded inwardly. He knew that this so-called heavenly ladder was far from complete and was only the crudest entry-level product. He would be able to stop it after some research and laying down some domains. "It's this poor Taoist's turn." The old Taoist smiled. He took a step forward and, with a swoosh, leapt onto the stone steps of the altar and charged upwards. He first relied on his own strength to run quickly until a majestic force pressed down on him. Only then did he produce an item. It was a small stone bridge, only about a foot long. He fished it out from his sleeves and, with a swoosh, emitted a brilliant glow. The runes on the stone bridge also formed a path which, like a bridge, would carry him forward. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. This was the work of a domain researcher. It was made from materials such as psychic jades and magnetic crystals. It was called the Realm Crossing Bridge. Its use was similar to the Heavenly Ladder. Unfortunately, the legendary finished product was too difficult to produce. Once successful, it would be regarded as a rare treasure by all sections. Both the old woman's Heavenly Ladder and the old Taoist's Realm Crossing Bridge were crude and flawed. They were far from the finished product. The Outer Realm people sure have a lot of treasures. They're all prepared for famous mountains and great rivers. Some people were astonished. "Grandpa, you can do it!" The problem lady shouted from below to cheer the old Taoist on. It had to be said that the old Taoist's methods were extraordinary. He rushed up in one go and almost reached the altar. In the end, he flicked his sleeves and attacked the offerings on the altar, stirring up a gust of astral wind. Clang! One of the 9 cauldrons on the altar was touched and emitted a metallic sound, following which a majestic ripple spread out. With a bang, the realm-crossing bridge in the old Taoist's hand was broken. He let out an odd cry and tumbled down in a sorry state, but he wasn't injured. Everyone was overwhelmed. The moment the cauldron rang out, many people's souls trembled. Some king-level experts even trembled and almost fell to the ground. How terrifying! Everyone was astonished. That was only one of the 9 cauldrons, yet it was already so extraordinary. The offerings were simply too terrifying. Sigh, if it were back in the day, everything on the altar would have been mine. The old Taoist sighed. He was at his wits' end. Everyone's hearts were itching. They could only watch helplessly. There were many divine objects on the altar, but they had no way of approaching them. They could only watch with envious eyes. Some people once again sought out Chu Feng and asked him to think of a way. "Let me try. You guys help me out in a while." Chu Feng stood in front of the altar and pondered continuously. He then began to carve symbols on the magnetic stones. If he could really break the altar's power, he definitely wouldn't have taken action now. He had no obligation to bring the mixed group of kings up the altar. He could do it himself. Before long, he had the help of a group of king-level experts. They threw the carved magnetic stones into the air and arranged them in an orderly manner to form a domain in the air. He was experimenting, carefully probing, and not actually making a move. Boom! The effects were astonishing. After the domain was formed, the altar began to rumble. The power of this place erupted and fiercely suppressed everything. The magnetic stones in the air were all blasted apart and turned into fine powder. However, the items on the jade table became unstable during the rumbling of the altar, and some of them rolled off the table. "Oh my, a good method! Something's falling down. Continue shaking it." People were dazed at first, but then they were pleasantly surprised. They felt that it was possible to shake down some offerings. Chu Feng tried again. He had people throw magnetic stones into the air from different directions to form a domain there. In the end, the power on the altar erupted once again and crushed down. The domain's runes were obliterated and all the magnetic stones exploded. Some people hurled boulders at the altar upon seeing this, but it was useless. They were repelled before they could even get close. Meanwhile, the altar didn't move in the slightest. Only the domain could draw upon the altar's power and cause this place to rumble. Chu Feng's heart was thumping wildly. That was because during this process, the originally unstable little grinding stone in his body began to rotate frantically as though it was calling for something to come down. He was somewhat regretful. He felt that he shouldn't have taken action so casually. If he had really taken some treasure from the altar in front of everyone's eyes, everyone would probably be envious. Boom! However, what he feared had come true. The little grinding stone in his body was simply too odd. It had unknowingly formed a pulling force and pulled something down from the altar. Within moments, something had fallen down. Chapter 344. The bowl was so big that it could be used in a bath. It fell from the sky and smashed down. Everyone was dumbfounded. This was an extremely large stone bowl, and there seemed to be black dog blood within it. It was swaying as it fell, and the liquid was about to splash out. At first, the group reacted quickly and wanted to rush forward to snatch it. But after seeing this scene, all of them began to flee like a swarm of bees. "Take me with you!" Chu Feng cried out. At this moment, he actually couldn't move. This was something drawn in by the little grinding stone in his body, and there was an ineffable attraction between the two. He had no idea why he couldn't move. But this group of people had no sense of loyalty. Not to mention those from the corporations, even that rebellious young lady who had called him handsome big brother had fled without a trace. She didn't want to come into contact with it, as though she were avoiding a snake or a scorpion. That was because the scene when this thing fell was simply too shocking. There were actually dog barks coming from such a large stone bowl, and the jet-black liquid was simply too terrifying. Black dog blood splashed out as it fell, emitting black smoke in the air. The old Grandmaster wanted to take action, but he was too far away. He had listened to Chu Feng and was guarding the entrance, afraid that the divine beast cub would escape. He arrived later than Chu Feng, so he didn't get close to him. Such a large bowl of black dog blood was accompanied by dog barking. It was simply too strange, and no one was willing to touch it. Swoosh! At the critical moment, Linoi took action. She was quite far away and hurled a rock at the big bowl. With a loud clang, the bowl swayed but didn't change its direction. It continued to fall in a straight line toward Chu Feng. Dog barks rang out incessantly at the mouth of the bowl, and black blood splattered in all directions. Chu Feng let out a miserable cry. How bitter! The black and white grinding stone in his body had locked onto this big bowl. The two were attracting each other with all their might, and it was impossible for him not to fall for it. At this time, he secretly used his spiritual energy to move the big bowl to one side, but to no avail. What kind of crappy bowl was it that rendered the extraordinary abilities of his body and mind ineffective? With a pu sound, a huge bowl smashed onto Chu Feng's body, making him see stars. Black blood splattered everywhere, drenching him all over. The dog barked incessantly. This was truly strange. Was something wrong? Chu Feng cursed. He wanted to curse out loud. How unfortunate! He actually had no way to avoid it. He was truly drenched in dog blood. He was too unlucky. This area was filled with black mist and dog blood was splattered everywhere. Vaguely, there seemed to be a black dog running around, barking nonstop. Chu Feng felt strange, because when the big bowl smashed into him, it immediately shattered, and something indescribable drilled into his body. Soon, he was shocked and understood what it was. Black substance. It was the same thing as the grinding stone in his body. For a golden Arhat evolver, it was a divine medicine that was extremely beneficial to him. However, to low-level evolvers this was a fatal poison. This substance was usually hidden in uninhabited areas in the depths of the universe. It was extremely rare, and even demonic sages would find it difficult to find. At the same time, this thing was wrapped in a layer of stone and couldn't be seen through. This stone bowl was made of a special layer of stone, and there was actually a black substance hidden within. Now that the big bowl had shattered, the special substance spilled out and drilled into Chu Feng's body. Chu Feng finally understood why the black and white grinding stone resonated with the two, and even felt a slight thirst. This was a substance of the same origin. Black blood was fuming and a big dog was barking nonstop. No one noticed that when the black liquid was splattering everywhere, a dense substance was emitted from the stone bowl and entered Chu Feng's body like smoke. Everyone only saw a mess. The black blood continuously evaporated after falling to the ground, and the black mist surged. At the same time, the dog's barking had yet to stop. "Handsome big brother, are you all right? You're so unlucky. This is a classic example of a dog's blood pouring over your head." The rebellious girl's large, watery eyes were full of sympathy. But just now, she had run away faster than anyone else and hadn't gone to rescue him. She wasn't interested in the black liquid and wanted to get as far away as possible. Chu Feng's indignant expression concealed the shock in his heart. He really hadn't expected that the dense black substance would spread and run into his body. But now, it wasn't a fatal poison to him. On the contrary, it had become a tonic. That was because the black and white grinding stone was frantically absorbing the substance with all its might. He could see that there wasn't much of this substance in his body, but now it was enough. In truth, it was exceptionally difficult to find this substance, and one might not even find it even if they searched the entire star realms. But there was one on this altar, and it was a kind of offering. Although he was drenched in black blood, Chu Feng was secretly rejoicing. This thing was like a great tonic for the little grinding stone. Chu Feng understood a little. Previously, the black and white grinding stone hadn't moved after it was formed. It was wrapped up in something like a fetal membrane and was constantly being nurtured. It was probably because it lacked nutrient. But now, the problem had been perfectly solved. At this time, he noticed that after the black substance was absorbed, half of it had automatically turned into a silver substance. This was extremely astonishing. One had to know that according to Yellow Cattle, this kind of mutation was simply impossible. It was simply too rare, and could only be found in legends among the 10 most powerful stars. But now, he could easily transform the silver substance with the help of the grinding stone. In the end, the black substance was completely absorbed by the grinding stone like smoke and turned into black and white. It had condensed to the point of no return. One had to know that this substance was between matter and energy, but now it had become purely material. At this moment, Chu Feng felt a sense of satisfaction and wanted to burp. The black and white grinding stone became hazy once again, and a layer of mist appeared. It was wrapped up in wisps of a mortal-like substance and submerged the area. He knew that the grinding stone had been replenished with nutrients and was about to take another step forward. Presumably, it would come into being very soon. He stopped his internal vision and began to pay attention to his external appearance. This was truly miserable and miserable. His body was drenched in black blood, and there wasn't a single inch of his body that wasn't wet. From an outsider's point of view, he stood there motionless as though he had been smashed silly. "Brother Chu Feng, are you all right?" someone asked. Jiang Luoshan, the old grandmaster, Linoi, and the others walked over and looked at him speechlessly. "What could possibly happen to me? Bathing in dragon's blood is a blessing from the heavens. You people don't understand, this is a great fortune." Chu Feng spoke nonsense with a deadpan expression. Everyone was speechless. Bathing in dragon's blood? That was black dog's blood. There were even dog barks just now. How strange. However, someone let out an odd cry at this time. It was the old Taoist. His expression was somewhat excited as he pulled his granddaughter forward and rushed toward Chu Feng. "Everyone who sees this has a share. Give me some black blood." He actually shouted and arrived before Chu Feng in the blink of an eye. He stretched out his hand to touch Chu Feng's body, wanting to soak it in black blood. The problem lady let out an odd cry and her beautiful face turned pale. She struggled with all her might in an attempt to escape. "Ah, save me! Damned old man, let me go! I'm so disgusting! This is 10,000-year-old black blood. It has many benefits, but you don't understand. It's extremely valuable. Otherwise, how could it be used as a sacrifice?" The old Taoist grabbed onto her and wouldn't let go. While speaking, he touched her tender face. The problem lady screamed and wanted to bite someone. What was going on? Everyone was dumbfounded and wore odd expressions. "This isn't real dog's blood, but blood bred from stone. Blood that's tens of thousands of years old will produce the cries of animals such as dogs, cats, and leopard. Blood that's over 100,000 years old will produce the cries of dragons. You people won't understand even if I explain. The old Taoist spoke as he drew the black blood from Chu Feng's drenched clothes and smeared it on himself and the problem lady. Everyone was flabbergasted. They felt like they had seen a ghost. Was this real? But the old man didn't seem like he was lying. Was there a need to disgust himself like this? After all, he had smeared a lot of it on his body. Everyone watched in silence. Only the old Taoist's granddaughter was screaming in pain. She was kicking and biting, unwilling to cooperate. Could it really be that kind of blood? At this time, the half-burned old woman revealed an odd expression. With a swoosh, she also rushed over and began to seize the blood. At the same time, she indicated for Linoy to follow her. The group was speechless. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Next, a large group of people rushed over. Seeing that even the Outer Realm people were doing this, there was no longer any hesitation. They began to act together. "You're all perverts!" Chu Feng cried out. He was already in a miserable state, but now, he was being touched and dragged around. What kind of state was this? "There's no need to use so much. Just smear some of it on your body. It's useless even if you use too much," the old Taoist kindly reminded as he pulled his granddaughter out of the crowd. "I don't want to live anymore. Damned old man, you're too evil. Although I like the handsome Chu Feng, I don't want to be stained by his black dog blood." The problem lady cried out miserably. Chu Feng was truly baffled. He was being fought over by many people. Even some old fellows had come over. "Old monk, you're already over 100 years old, yet you're still touching my body," Chu Feng cried out. At the same time, he glared at some of the female kings and said, "Be more reserved." After everything quietened down, most of the people had smeared some black blood on their bodies. Even Linoy and Jiang Luoshan were no exception. Their fair faces were covered in black patterns. "Old Taoist, are you trying to trick us?" In the end, someone suddenly became vigilant. This was too strange. "Don't worry, there will be a change soon. It can be said that I'm reminding you all of a fortune. Let's see if you're lucky enough to enjoy it." The old Taoist was calm. Suddenly, Chu Feng was the first to undergo a change. Bursts of black light soared up from his body. Then, his body became translucent and was enveloped in a layer of black radiance. This made his body look extremely translucent. Everyone jumped in fright. There really was a change. What was going on? Everyone looked at Chu Feng in astonishment. Specks of light were speckled on his body. If it weren't for the black radiance, he would have looked like he was about to sprout wings and ascend to immortality. It would have been extremely dazzling. Not to mention his body, even his hair was like this. A thin layer of light pervaded the air and wrapped around him. Chapter 345. Even Chu Feng himself was astonished. The so-called black dog's blood had turned into a kind of spiritual radiance, and was about to seep into his body through his pores. Moreover, as time passed, this kind of qi gradually flourished and became increasingly scalding. It was as if he was being roasted in a furnace. He didn't stop it at first and allowed the black light to flow freely into his body. He felt extremely comfortable as the spiritual radiance illuminated everything. However, at this time, the black and white grinding stone in his body began to rotate. It wasn't fast and could even be considered slow. Moreover, it was moving under the cover of mist. In the blink of an eye, the black spiritual radiance was completely forced out of his body. The black and white grinding stone was incomparably tyrannical. An odd expression appeared on Chu Feng's face. What was going on? He immediately became cautious. That was because the black and white grinding stone could crush the dregs and leave behind the essence. It could be considered miraculous. According to Yellow Cattle, this kind of thing would be an important item in the future and was related to one's Dao fruit. However, it rejected the black radiance, looking down on it, directly scattering it. Although Chu Feng didn't turn his head, He was paying attention to the old Taoist with his divine instinct. He discovered that there was a flash of ridicule on the old man's face, as if he was watching a play. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. This old bastard really didn't have any good ideas, and was trying to trick him. This so-called black blood born from the strange stone might not be a good thing. At this time, the old Taoist's body began to emit black light. The specks of light made him look like an immortal, as if he was about to soar into the heavens. The old man's appearance was simply too good. "Oh my, it's my turn." The old Taoist let out an odd cry and quickly took out an ancient wooden stick. His entire body became resplendent as he forced the black light towards the stick. Chu Feng knew things were bad after seeing this. This old bastard was indeed a scoundrel. This was the real way to use it. He was actually tricking him into using his body to absorb the black light. However, he wasn't flustered because he had nothing to fear with the black and white grinding stone in his body. The old Taoist shouted at the problem lady, "Granddaughter, what are you standing there for? Hurry up and do it. This black blood is a spiritual divine item. After mixing it with your own blood energy, it can be used to nurture weapons and even nurture a god. Don't waste it." This black-hearted old Taoist. At this moment, not to mention Chu Feng, even the others wanted to kick him. He was too immoral. It was clearly used to nurture weapons, yet he misled everyone. "Ah, grandfather, you're so bad. How can you trick people like this? Will something happen to handsome big brother Chu Feng?" He absorbed the black light into his body. The rebellious young girl still had a conscience, scolding and complaining to her grandfather. "It's fine. It's fine even if this thing enters his body. It can nurture certain parts of his body and give them the characteristics of weapons." The old man chuckled. As he spoke, he infused all the black light into his wooden stick weapon, causing it to glow with spirituality as if it had a life of its own. At this time, the problem lady's body also began to shine. Specks of black light appeared on the surface of her body, mixed with blood energy and contaminated her aura. According to the old Taoist, this was a good time. "Hurry up, don't tell me you really want to refine your own body into a weapon? Even though this thing is good, there are some side effects," the old Taoist anxiously urged. "Old Taoist," Chu Feng cursed. This damned old Taoist was truly despicable to harm him. "Brat, you once burned this Taoist grandpa on Mount Zhijin. This is a lesson for you." The old Taoist let out an odd laugh. At this time, he urged his granddaughter once again, "Hurry up. If you're a step late and this black light condenses on your body, there will be problems in the future. For example, you'll start barking." What a scam! At this moment, everyone was scared stiff. Their faces turned pale and the scene was thrown into chaos. Everyone was looking for weapons in a hurry. That was because the consequences were too terrifying. They didn't dare to imagine what would happen if a dog were to bark from within their body. The problem lady was usually fearless, but now she was pale with fright. She quickly took out a silver bell and forced the black light into it. The group of people wanted to curse out loud. This was an opportunity, but the consequences would be terrifying if they were a step too slow. Some people stole glances at Chu Feng. Some were sympathetic, but there were even more who were rejoicing in his misfortune. "It's fine, don't be afraid." At this time, the old Taoist consoled everyone. "Men, don't worry. This thing can make your body as tough as a weapon and give you a spiritual radiance. Once you reach a certain level of strength, you can use your body as a weapon. It's fine even if there's a bit of noise in your body." "Old Taoist bastard!" At this time, someone cried out loudly. That was because he didn't have a weapon on him. If the black light were to condense on his body, and he were to hear dog barking in the future, it would be truly tragic. Even Linoy, who was usually cold and elegant, was now moving quickly. She could no longer remain calm. Chu Feng was quite calm because he already knew what this thing was. The various corporations had given him some incomplete texts related to domains. Among them, some of the withered yellow papers had mentioned that this was a type of secret liquid born from stone. It wasn't blood like the old Taoist had said, nor was it black dog blood. This was a type of heavenly treasure. It possessed a powerful spiritual nature and could allow weapons to gain sentience. It could even nurture a deity within the weapon and give birth to its own consciousness. That was because this kind of liquid was unfathomably mysterious and possessed astonishing spirituality. The secret liquid born from stone over 10,000 years would produce the cries of various animals. After 100,000 years, the spirituality would become boundlessly terrifying and could emit the cries of dragons and phoenixes. Of course, the older the better. That was because the mysterious liquid would dry up after a certain age and lose all its essence. Chu Feng couldn't help but want to curse once again. This was truly a scam. Mixing this thing into the body was no different from mixing it into a weapon. That part of the blood and flesh would nurture the weapon's spirituality. Domain researchers dabbled in too many things. Among them, searching for rare treasures in the famed mountains and underground was one of their main jobs. That was why the domain research notes would mention these strange substances. Chu Feng had the black and white grinding stone with him, so this thing couldn't invade him. He moved slowly and poured all the black light into the scarlet flying knife. He didn't reveal his king-level energy because he was only an awakened at the moment. Although the black liquid was good, he didn't consider pouring it into the diamond chakram. He felt it wasn't a good match for it because the black and white grinding stone didn't think much of it. Presumably, it was enough to nurture the flying knife. I can consider the diamond chakram if there's a secret liquid that can emit a dragon's roar, Chu Feng muttered to himself. At this time, everyone was in a hurry. Even the old Taoist was no exception. He was using the black light to refine his fire stick. Chu Feng shot a glance at the old Taoist. He quickly carved symbols and used magnetic stones to quietly lay down a weapon-nurturing domain around him. This domain enveloped the broken bowl and the black liquid on the ground. At this moment, everyone was focused and couldn't care about anything else. Even the old Taoist was the same. He was nurturing and refining his own weapon with great concentration. That was because this matter was too important and he didn't dare get distracted. A weapon with spirituality was simply too important to an evolved being. Chu Feng lowered his stance and arrived in front of the old Taoist to harass him gently. His words were sincere, saying that he was in the wrong in the past and asking the old Taoist to help remove the hidden danger of the black light. The old Taoist was extremely busy and didn't want to be disturbed. He replied casually, "It's fine. You're not a woman. The occasional noise from your body is nothing. On the contrary, it will increase your strength. Although this Taoist isn't narrow-minded, his nature isn't bad. I won't cheat you. Damned old Taoist, isn't this cheating?" These were Chu Feng's words in his heart. But on the surface, he was nagging incessantly and deliberately harassing the old Taoist. In the end, he softened his tone and pulled the old Taoist over to the broken bowl in a respectful manner. "Taoist Grandpa, this way please. There's still black blood on the ground. Use it to increase your firestick's spirituality. You can slowly refine it and try to turn it into a golden cudgel. This is the dragon beating staff, okay? Move to the side." The old Taoist was very anxious and answered perfunctorily. After moving his feet, he waved his hand to let Chu Feng go and told him to think of a solution later. Chu Feng was quite tactful. He retreated a certain distance and circled around the old Taoist as if he wanted to approach him but was hesitant to speak. In truth, he wasn't quite at ease. He secretly placed magnetic stones and carved runes among the rocks in the vicinity. Now, he had laid down 8 layers of weapon-nurturing domains in this area. That was because he knew from the incomplete domain booklet that it could nurture weapons and people. He was currently nurturing an old Taoist. Let's add some catalytic runes, mumbled Chu Feng. He was afraid that the weapon nurturing effect would be too slow. He wanted to increase its efficiency and rapidly nurture the old Taoist. Afterwards, the area became quiet. Everyone was focused on nurturing their weapons, and no one dared to be distracted. Chu Feng also calmed down. He fiddled with the red flying knife at a moderate pace and poured all the black light from his body into it. Not a speck of it was left on his body. As for what had entered his body, it had all been chased out by the little grinding stone. Following which, he walked to a sufficient distance and began to lay down another weapon nurturing domain. This time there were 10 layers. Then he tossed the flying knife in. An hour later, the flying knife's spirituality rose sharply and became scarlet and resplendent. Chu Feng was astonished. The so-called black blood hadn't changed its color and had been absorbed. Vaguely, the flying knife trembled slightly and was about to fly away. He knew that the refinement had been completed and walked over to pick it up. Chu Feng didn't use the imperial sword technique. After all, the impression he gave others was that he had been crippled and had fallen from the king realm to become an awakened. He pinched the miniature knife between his fingers and waved it about. It emitted a bizarre transformation and emitted a burst of dog barks. Chu Feng was flabbergasted. You can call it flying dog from now on. Ha ha! It was at this time that the old Taoist was also laughing loudly. He danced about with the wooden stick in hand. He was delighted because he had succeeded. Woof, woof, woof. As he swung the wooden stick, apart from causing the air to tremble, the stick itself was actually barking like a dog. It's too spiritual. This stick might even give birth to a god of its own after being nurtured for a few years. Grandpa Taoist, even if it becomes a god, it's still a dog. That's not too good, is it? Chu Feng tried to numb him. He didn't want the old man to walk out of that area. What do you know? This thing can evolve and transform continuously. It's a dog god at first, but it might become a dragon god in the future. If I can find a golden liquid over 100,000 years old to evolve my weapon, it'll definitely become a dragon's roar. The old Taoist was pleased. At the same time, he muttered to himself, I succeeded so quickly. The effects are extraordinarily good. Chu Feng curled his lips and cursed inwardly. I've already laid down 8 weapon nurturing domains for you. How can the effects be bad? At this time, Chu Feng had nothing to say to numb the old Taoist. Oh my damn it! What's going on? The old Taoist cried out loudly. He had stopped refining his weapon and retracted his consciousness. His sharp divine instincts told him that something was wrong. F*ck me. The old Taoist cursed. That was because there was a black glow on his body. Moreover, it was orderly and had turned into stripes. The so-called weapon nurturing domain was a silent nourishment. It branded the black blood on the ground onto his body and began to nurture weapons. The old Taoist turned pale with fright. He hurriedly gathered his spirit and circulated his energy to stop everything. I'm so angry, he roared furiously. That was because there was a certain time limit. After this thing had infected his body, it had to be forced out within a certain period of time. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to remove. The old Taoist was flustered and exasperated. It was difficult for him to get rid of this black glow. He used his secret arts to find ways to alleviate it and expel it with all his might. In the end, there was some effect. Many of the stripes dimmed and even dissipated, but some parts still appeared and left behind imprints. For instance, his butt, which had been burned by the essence flames of extreme yin and extreme yang, became a disaster area. Grandpa Taoist, many parts of your body are emitting black light. You're so intelligent. Chu Feng spoke with a sense of schadenfreude. The old Taoist was anxious. He tried his best to come up with a solution. In the end, his butt erupted with light and a dog's bark rang out. Oh no! His face turned green. There was no way he could get rid of the spirituality in this area. Amazing, refining it into a weapon. That's not right, that area should be thick and coarse, Chu Feng said. The boundless deity is infuriating. The old Taoist was about to go crazy. In the end, he sat down cross-legged and wanted to use his forbidden secret arts. But he knew his chances weren't great. Some parts were destined to be branded with spiritual radiance. Let's leave quickly, Chu Feng whispered to the old Grandmaster. The old Grandmaster had been calm all along because he had never tried to snatch the black liquid. Should we leave the pilgrimage grounds? The old Grandmaster asked. Let's take this opportunity to see if we can capture that young divine beast, said Chu Feng. At the same time, he prepared to run away. That was because the old Taoist would likely discover the weapon-nurturing domain in the surroundings once he calmed down and accepted reality. Chu Feng took advantage of the old Taoist's seclusion to run away. After entering the luminous thorny woodland, he shot out his flying knife to test it out. Woof, woof, woof! The dog's barks were very loud. The scarlet flying knife sped through the air as fast as lightning, as though it were about to bite someone. Chapter 346. Chu Feng's expression was odd as he gazed at the flying knife. He knew that this thing was too powerful and far surpassed the past. It itself was emitting an astonishing amount of energy. It possessed a terrifying spirituality and could automatically draw in the energy particles drifting through the air. But this thing was simply too odd. It would bark like a dog during battle. Would this frighten the enemy or cause them to roar with laughter? Don't tell me I really have to call you Flying Dog in the future? Chu Feng mumbled. Then, he and the old Grandmaster continued their mad escape. He stopped after arriving at the area where the golden eggshell had shattered. He ran to the area where he had set up his domain and observed it in detail. There was no damage. Let's leave first and come back to catch the young holy beast later. Chu Feng pondered for fear that the old Taoist would chase after him and fight it out with him. But before he left, he made some arrangements here and reinforced the domains. He was afraid that the creatures trapped in that mysterious area would escape. Go, go, go! Chu Feng ran with the old Grandmaster in a hurry. As for the things on the altar, he had no intention of touching them because there was no way to get up there. It was thanks to the little grinding stone that he could bring down the stone bowl. In front of the altar, the old Taoist was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. His whole body was emitting purple mist, and his strength was terrifying. Even the half-severed old woman was apprehensive. His appearance was solemn and dignified like an old immortal. His body was sparkling and lustrous, and his entire being possessed an ethereal temperament. However, the suppressed barks from his body could still be heard from time to time. This caused some people to glance at each other with odd expressions. In the end, he suddenly opened his eyes and cried out in anger. That was because he couldn't get rid of the spiritual radiance on his body. The old Taoist stood up and paced about with a dark expression. However, he couldn't think of a solution. Then, his eyes widened as he saw a magnet hidden among the rocks. Following which, he widened his eyes and discovered many of them nearby. Little bastard, this Taoist grandpa isn't done with you. The old Taoist was immediately anxious. How could he still have any sage-like temperament? He began to stomp his feet in exasperation. Where is he? Goddammit, that brat ran away? You tricked your grandpa. The old Taoist's morale was so low that his fingers were trembling. He originally wanted to deal with that brat, but in the end, he was plotted against. How could an old faker like him accept this? Granddaughter, let's go after him. The old Taoist grabbed his granddaughter's wrist and chased after her as fast as lightning. At the same time, he was seething with anger. Seeing her grandfather's sorrowful and indignant appearance, the rebellious young girl couldn't disobey, and ran along with him. However, when the old Taoist sprinted and circulated his energy, The barking from his buttocks could be heard. Moreover, as he increased his speed and energy flowed rapidly, the barking became louder. The crowd was dumbfounded as they watched him leave. At this time, the problem lady said, "Grandfather, let's not run like this. I keep feeling like we're being chased by a dog. Running in panic makes me shudder." "Little evil creature, are you trying to anger me to death?" The old Taoist was so angry that his face turned black. "That's right. Who told you to harm others first? Now you're getting your retribution, aren't you? I heard that this thing is related to domain researchers. You'll have to ask Chuguogwa for help with domain runes." "Me? Beg him? I'll beat him to death." The old Taoist ran madly as the barking from his buttocks grew louder and louder. He was so angry that he wanted to smash his head into the ground. Seeing the old Taoist disappear, everyone glanced at each other. This old Taoist's temperament is extraordinary, but he's too much of a scoundrel. Now he's getting his retribution, ha ha. The group laughed loudly. They realized that Chu Feng probably hadn't fallen for the trick. Otherwise, why would he run away with a guilty conscience? Moreover, he even schemed against the old Taoist in advance. Apparently, he understood this secret liquid. After laughing, they paced back and forth for a while before retreating helplessly. They didn't dare charge in recklessly without Chu Feng, who understood domains, around. Now, everyone realized that Chu Feng's value was too high. Cooperating with him, and opening up the mysterious spaces on the famed mountains would yield astonishing rewards. Some people were hesitating whether or not they should awaken the dormant entities, the foundations. In the end, Mount Tai became quiet. They retreated along their original path without a hitch and didn't take the wrong path. Some people turned back continuously. Would this place become Chu Feng's private plot? The offerings on the altar at the pilgrimage grounds were too astonishing and were enough to drive people mad with jealousy. Could it be that they would all fall into Chu Feng's hands as his attainments in domains increased? Some people found it difficult to calm down. On this day, an old Taoist was running down Mount Tai. He traversed 800 kilometers, and dog barks rang out incessantly along the way. Many people thought he was being chased by a dog. Along the way, he stopped many times to scout for information, hoping to catch up to Chu Feng. Many people along the way refused him, saying, "Taoist Grandpa, don't come over. Why do I hear you being chased by a dog? Don't come over. Taoist Grandpa, don't implicate me. Strange, where's that dog?" The old Taoist was so angry that he wanted to beat people up. "Do you all know how to speak? Shut up. It's me who's killing that bastard." Chu Feng hadn't gone far and was still on Mount Tai. He had only laid down a domain to hide himself and the old Grandmaster. After a long while, Chu Feng estimated that almost everyone had left. Only then did he move out to enter that mysterious space to capture the young divine beast. He didn't let the old Grandmaster enter the mysterious space because he was afraid of some unforeseen events. "Senior, stand guard outside. If that thing escapes in a sorry state, you must intercept it. If it's terrifying and comes out aggressively, you must hide. Don't take the risk." If that divine beast was young and not powerful, Chu Feng alone would be enough. If it was truly terrifying and possessed the power of a demonic god, even the old Grandmaster wouldn't be able to stop it. A cobblestone path hung in the air amidst the dense mist. Chu Feng walked in calmly alone. Just what kind of race is it? After a golden egg hatches, it has scales and feathers. It's really strange. Chu Feng was suspicious. He arrived here once again and picked up the eggshell to study it. Suddenly, Chu Feng looked up because he had sensed that there were people walking out from the woodland. At the same time, those people also saw him. A young man said with a smile, "Come, take a look. Who's here?" "Our great domain master Chu Feng has returned quietly." His name was Zhu Ming, a genius who had just joined the Hollow Jade Temple. He had short hair and was dressed in loose, modern sportswear. However, he was holding a cold weapon in his hand, a silver spear. Apparently, Zhu Ming was quite surprised and delighted as though he had seen his prey. Chu Feng revealed an expression of surprise. He knew this person. He was a newly advanced king who had joined the Hollow Jade Temple because he had been together with the Hollow Jade Temple Master not long ago. Who would have thought Zhu Ming and the others would stay here after everyone had left Mount Tai? Chu Feng, you're quite bold. You dare come back alone? Zhu Ming revealed a tyrannical smile and said, You're from the Hollow Jade Temple. How about I invite you back? He felt that he could accomplish a great merit today, and capture Chu Feng and send him back to the Hollow Jade Temple. As for the rumors outside that Chu Feng had broken off relations with the Hollow Jade Temple, Zhu Ming didn't care. Now, he viewed Chu Feng as prey. How interesting. Chu Feng, you actually came back alone. It seems there's a divine item here to be taken. Another person spoke. His name was Lu Tong. He wasn't very old and seemed to be around 25 or 26 years old. However, his eyes were resplendent with purple splendor and were emitting powerful energy fluctuations. Lu Tong had joined the Eight Visions Temple and was also a newly risen king-level expert. Chu Feng, why don't you come with me to the Eight Visions Temple? Lu Tong smiled faintly. He believed that this was a rare opportunity to capture Chu Feng. Not to mention the enmity between Chu Feng and the Hollow Jade Temple and the Eight Visions Temple, just the fact that he had become a domain researcher was enough to make the two palace masters very hopeful. You want to capture me? Chu Feng finally spoke. If that's how you interpret it, it's not impossible, Lu Tong said lazily. Oh, before that, you should bring us to continue our search for fortunes. You came back quietly because you have a way to ascend that altar. Perform well. Zhu Ming spoke once again. His eyes were bright and full of desire. Chu Feng broke into a laugh. These people really thought he was crippled and could be suppressed at will? He said coldly, Your tone isn't small at all. You dare threaten and intimidate me? Zhu Ming laughed loudly and said, Do you really think you're the Demon King Chu of the past? The times have changed and the world has evolved rapidly. We've become top experts while you've been crippled. Chu Feng, I'm warning you. You'd better stand there and not move. Otherwise, you won't have a good ending, Lu Tong threatened. They were afraid that Chu Feng would lay down a domain. But seeing that his hands were empty and there were no magnetic stones around, they weren't too worried. They felt that he didn't have any materials to use. Chu Feng's expression sank. Who do you think you are? Even the Hollow Jade Temple Master and the Eight Visions Temple Master wouldn't dare speak to me like this. Are you joking? It's important to know one's own worth, yet you still dare to act so arrogantly. I'm very unhappy and the consequences will be dire. Zhu Ming mocked with a cold expression as he stepped forward. Ha ha! The others all laughed loudly. There were both beast races and humans among them. They had been ordered by the Hollow Jade Temple and Eight Visions Temple Masters to guard this place and see who would come back. They ranged from 4 to 6 severed shackles. You're very unhappy and the consequences will be dire? At this time, Chu Feng sneered and stepped forward to meet them. Zhu Min moved with a swoosh and attacked Chu Feng. He was afraid that the latter would tamper with the nearby domains, and was prepared to capture him immediately to teach him a lesson in blood. However, the next moment, the cold smile on his face froze. That was because Chu Feng was even faster. He grabbed his neck and broke it with a crack. Ah! He was terrified and his eyes were full of astonishment. He fell to the ground and twitched but didn't die immediately. He stared fixedly at Chu Feng. What, weren't you crippled? Lu Tong felt his hair stand on end. He was shocked and quickly retreated. The others were all scared out of their wits after seeing this. The former Demon King Chu was a synonym for invincibility. Even though some of them had severed 6 shackles and had become top-grade experts, they were still terrified after witnessing his strength. That was because they had all looked up to Chu Feng and had only risen to prominence recently. Crack! In the blink of an eye, Lu Tong was caught up and thrown to the ground by Chu Feng with a broken neck. Run! The others cried out. How cowardly! How can you call yourself a king? Chu Feng chased after him. Boom! A single punch drowned out the heaven and earth. One of the people in front of him exploded into pieces. Thump! The next moment, Chu Feng appeared in front of another person and threw another punch. That person was shocked and furious. He tried to resist with all his might, but in the end, both his arms were broken and his body was torn apart. Following which, he also exploded. The wind from the punch whistled through the air and dazzled with radiance. It was as if a great sun had covered the sky. Several people had been killed in just a few punches. On the ground, Zhu Ming and Lu Tong's faces were full of shock. Although their necks had been broken, they hadn't died immediately. They were almost scared to death after seeing this scene. They were filled with terror and were gasping for air. Comparatively speaking, I prefer to fight rather than quietly study domains. You guys are too weak, said Chu Feng. On the ground, the two were terrified. Thump thump. Chu Feng kicked them to death with 2 kicks. He didn't want to wait for them to slowly breathe their last. In the end, he arrived at a certain area and began to disintegrate the domains. Swoosh! He heard some movement and realized that the entity inside had been alarmed. Don't be afraid, I'll bring you home. Chu Feng tried to make his voice as gentle as possible. He was prepared to catch a divine beast cub and was very curious about what kind of creature it was. Chapter 347. The thistles and thorns were glowing. There were silvery white ones and faint golden ones. The plants here were all special and contained dense energy fluctuations. Even the rocks and soil were flowing with multicolored light and full of spirituality. Chu Feng was dismantling the domains carefully. After he spoke, the inside became silent and the creature went into hibernation. There was no problem with the domains he had laid down. There was no need to withdraw them. The main purpose was to prevent the creature from escaping, and there were also ancient domain runes here. As he went deeper, a hazy mist appeared, but the auspicious radiance didn't diminish. The entire place was covered in a faint golden luster. Even the springs and puddles he saw were also brightly colored. Ordinary people would definitely think that this was an immortal's residence. That was because the energy here was dense and exuberant. Even breathing here made him feel refreshed. Evolvers would be able to improve their constitution if they stayed here for a long time. Apparently, the domains here weren't much and couldn't stump Chu Feng. Domains could be seen everywhere in the pilgrimage grounds, but the truly terrifying ones were the forbidden areas. For instance, the area behind the altar was enshrouded in golden mist. There was bound to be a terrifying domain there that blotted out the sky. Anyone who charged in would die without a doubt. The area in front of the altar was relatively safer. Chu Feng had already led everyone through it once. Crack! He carefully dug out a piece of scarlet jade from the soil. It was glowing with a dazzling light and seemed to be dripping blood. There were mysterious runes within. Good stuff. There were materials left behind by ancient spellcasters here. They were much more powerful than Chu Feng's own magnetic stones and jade pieces. Chu Feng dismantled the domains and collected the materials, throwing them all into the pristine jade bottle. Bang! In the end, he succeeded. He dispelled the domains in this area and stepped inside. He felt that this creature shouldn't be too terrifying. Otherwise, if it was strong enough, it wouldn't have hidden here. Instead, it would have entered the back of the altar. After all, it was still a cub and was at its weakest. Once it matured, it might even become a demonic god. The domains Chu Feng had laid down were still there. That was because he was worried that the creature would escape. He couldn't help but frown after sensing it carefully. This area was neither too big nor too small. There was a silvery white stream with fish swimming about inside. There's a creature! Chu Feng was flabbergasted, but upon closer inspection, Although it contained a certain amount of energy, it was far inferior to that of a god beast. At most, it was just tender and delicious. There were also fruit trees here, and there were some mutant fruits growing on them. Some were bright red like agate, while others were glistening yellow. The fragrance of the fruits assailed one's nostrils. They could awaken an ordinary person, but they definitely wouldn't be able to transform into a king. These were opportunities for ordinary people, but in Chu Feng's eyes they were just fresh fruit. In the past, he couldn't eat it, but now that he had the black and white grinding stone, it didn't matter. Naturally, he didn't stand on ceremony and threw it into the spatial bottle after plucking it. After a careful search, he didn't find any spiritual beings. What was going on? The cub escaped? Huh! Finally, Chu Feng found something. On a flat piece of land, he saw a brown rock with broken scales. Then, he found engravings on a nearby stone wall. He carefully tried to identify them, but to his surprise, he didn't recognize any of them. They looked like oracle bone scripts, but also like bell and cauldron scripts. Chu Feng pondered it over and over again, but still couldn't figure out what it meant. He was speechless. However, there was also an engraving on the side. It was crooked and seemed to be drawn by a cub. After looking at it for a long time, Chu Feng roughly understood the meaning. For a moment, he was incomparably disappointed. The engraving on the stone wall roughly described the birth of a cub and being trapped in the pilgrimage grounds. Finally, it found a way to escape and thus left. It's already escaped? Chu Feng looked up at the sky. There was no black dog's blood pouring down on him. How could his luck be so bad? This was too disappointing. He had barged in high spirits and was prepared to capture the divine beast alive. In the end, it was long gone. What a disappointment! Chu Feng suddenly turned his head and saw a toad crawling out of the water. It was nibbling on a river fish, and then it hopped toward the thistles and thorns. It wasn't small and weighed at least 4 to 5 kilograms. It also had energy fluctuations and was stronger than the river fish, but not by much. Chu Feng ignored it and then transformed into a bolt of lightning. He quickly roamed the area in search of more clues. However, he was disappointed because there were no more clues. After observing the area once more, Chu Feng rushed toward the exit with a swoosh. There were no abnormalities and no living beings had destroyed his domain. He was suspicious and finally found the toad. He stared at it repeatedly. The toad was squatting there. After eating the river fish, it croaked a few times. The sound was quite muffled. Following which, Chu Feng laughed mischievously. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He didn't care about anything else and threw out several magnetic stones to surround the toad. He was setting up a domain. The toad was frightened out of its wits. It wanted to flee but was blocked by the domain. Don't be afraid. I have no evil intentions toward you. I just want to bring you out of here. Chu Feng did his best to maintain a gentle attitude as he moved closer to talk to the toad. However, the toad was in a daze and didn't react at all. It was simply too ordinary. You're very smart. You carved words and drew pictures in advance to make people believe that the divine beast cub had already left. It's not simple at all. Chu Feng smiled and continued to talk to it. However, the toad didn't react at all. It only ran away when Chu Feng approached. It was no different from a normal toad. Chu Feng reached out to catch it. It suddenly spat out a mouthful of liquid toward Chu Feng. He quickly dodged to one side and said, "Stop hiding. You're the only toad here. Where did you come from?" Only at this moment did the toad's lifeless eyes move about. It then opened its mouth and spat wildly at Chu Feng. Damn! Chu Feng dodged. This toad's expression changed too quickly. After opening its mouth, it practically poured down a torrential downpour. He was almost drenched. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Pfft! The toad opened its mouth, stirring up a gale and splashing liquid in all directions. This change was too fast. It was still in a daze just a moment ago, but now it was spitting wildly. Moreover, the scene was quite spectacular. It was like a torrential downpour. Divine beast, you're too disgusting. Can you not do this? Stop spitting. Chu Feng cried out. For a moment, he didn't know whether the liquid was poisonous or not. He could only dodge. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like the toad was releasing poison. It was really spitting mouthful after mouthful of saliva at Chu Feng. Damn your grandpa! Chu Feng felt that it was too odd. This toad was a bit odd. It spat over 20 mouthfuls of saliva at Chu Feng in one go and forced him to retreat. Following which, it began to run away. The simple domains formed by the magnetic stones couldn't stop it. The ground cracked and the magnetic stones exploded. Moreover, it was too fast. It was like a tempest, but also like a bolt of lightning. What made Chu Feng even more confused was that it wasn't jumping. Instead, it was moving with all four limbs. When a person was lying on the ground, it used both its hands and feet to crawl forward. Its four limbs moved at an inconceivably fast speed. What kind of toad is this? Chu Feng was dumbfounded and chased after it. This creature was spitting saliva and crawling on all four limbs. Its posture was odd and it didn't walk the normal path. Thump, thump, thump. After arriving in the distance, the toad was smashing about madly in an attempt to charge out of Chu Feng's domain. However, it was obstructed here and couldn't charge out. Chu Feng laughed loudly. He was now sure that the so-called divine beast was this toad. Only this was too strange. Where were the golden scales and feathers? Where did they grow to? He reckoned that this wasn't its true form. Croak. In the end, the toad turned around and let out a muffled cry that shook even Chu Feng's spirit. Apparently, this divine beast was extraordinary. Its spiritual power was extremely powerful and far surpassed that of ordinary king-level entities. At the same time, it emitted spiritual fluctuations and questioned Chu Feng. Why did he attack it when there was no enmity between them? I've already said that I have no ill intentions. I just want to make friends with you, said Chu Feng. The toad retracted its aura and its bulging eyes were pure and innocent. It asked Chu Feng if it was true. Of course it's true. Chu Feng put on a harmless expression and produced some mutant fruits with a smile. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like a human trafficker with a lollipop in his hand. Croak! All of a sudden, the toad erupted when Chu Feng approached and handed over the mutant fruits. Golden energy surged like heavenly thunder as it smashed into Chu Feng. The most terrifying thing was that its spiritual energy, accompanied by that croak, shook intensely like thunder from the 9 heavens. It wanted to destroy Chu Feng's spirit. This was an extremely terrifying energy ripple. The nearby mountain rocks exploded and turned into fine powder. The small stream evaporated and turned into mist in the blink of an eye. Even the ground was sinking and cracking apart. This toad was extremely powerful and had almost seriously injured Chu Feng. It had been immature and naive a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, it had unleashed a torrential barrage of attacks against Chu Feng. Additionally, it leapt up like a human and struck out with its palms, exploding with lightning. Chu Feng revealed an astonished expression after exchanging blows with the toad. This toad's palm strength was vigorous and contained astonishing energy. Croak, 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 its body had grown larger, and when it stood upright, it was now as tall as Chu Feng. Moreover, it continuously struck out with its palms, destroying the surrounding boulders and causing the cliffs to crumble. For a moment, it seemed to possess the might of thunder and lightning and was actually able to fight against Chu Feng. Amidst the golden light, this toad was incomparably strange. It was like a martial arts expert as it slapped out incessantly with its palms. It was just like the legendary Ouyang Feng who knew the toad art. At this moment, its appearance was solemn and dignified. Its entire body was emitting incomparably brilliant golden light as it engaged in a life-and-death battle with Chu Feng. Chu Feng was astonished. This toad was too abnormal and seemed more like a martial arts expert than many humans. It stood upright and only touched the ground with its hind limbs. Its front limbs danced about, sending palm imprints swirling about amidst the flourishing golden multicolored light. This toad's entire body was glowing and its appearance was solemn. It suddenly took advantage of Chu Feng's contact to open its mouth and spit out a mouthful of saliva when they were face to face. Pfft! #yen%. Chu Feng tilted his head and evaded. This was something he had never experienced before. Two great experts were fighting and one of them was spitting at the other. He could see that it wasn't venom but pure saliva. This toad was too wretched and was doing this on purpose. Pfft! As expected, it would spit once it got close. What kind of divine beast are you? Show me your true form. Goddamn it, you're too disgusting. If you spit again, I'll roast you later. Chu Feng threatened. Thump! This toad's saliva possessed astonishing penetrative power and could even shatter the cliffs. It could also be considered a type of attack. Very soon, Chu Feng's expression darkened because the saliva had turned into a torrential downpour. Thump, thump, thump! He unleashed a series of heavy blows in order to suppress this powerful toad. Show me your true form. Illiterate, I disdain talking to you. You can't even recognize the words I write. Finally, the toad opened its mouth and used its spirit to speak disdainfully to Chu Feng. Chu Feng immediately felt like he was in a mess. Who can recognize those bone inscriptions of yours? I'll beat you to death today. Chu Feng was angry. Bah, illiterate! The toad spat again and fought back. Chapter 348. This toad was whistling and spitting out golden clouds and bursting with lightning. It was extremely powerful, but it was no match for Chu Feng after a while. With a bang, it was sent flying by Chu Feng's slap. Chu Feng's palm was imbued with powerful energy and was powerful enough to collapse a mountain. How terrifying was it? It would be even more astonishing if it were a creature of flesh and blood. However, the toad's skin was coarse and its flesh was thick. It trembled violently but wasn't seriously injured. Could still jump about. Roar! Moreover, it was at this time that it no longer croaked and instead let out a bestial roar. It was fairly astonishing. The forest exploded and the vegetation turned into fragments. Several thousand kilograms of rocks flew into the air. It rushed over once again to fight Chu Feng with all its might. If you don't submit, I'll really roast you, said Chu Feng. Bang, bang, bang this time. He didn't show any mercy and attacked with all his might. His fingers emitted blazing radiance and contained astonishing energy. It was as if they contained radiation which caused the surrounding cliffs to warp and collapse. In the end, the toad was beaten until it couldn't move anymore and blood seeped out from the corner of its mouth. Do you submit? Chu Feng crouched down and asked. He spat out a mouthful of saliva and quickly evaded. You're still not convinced? Then let's fight again, Chu Feng said. He didn't want to win people over with virtue anymore. This strange toad was spitting at him and looking down on him for being illiterate. It was obvious at a glance that it couldn't be subdued through normal methods. It was better to be more straightforward and use force to subdue the other party. Bang, bang, bang! The toad was listless, but Chu Feng was still attacking and beating it up. I'll fight it out with you. The toad was furious. It struggled free and began to fight Chu Feng again. Unfortunately, it wasn't a match for him and suffered another round of beating. Just like that, Chu Feng would beat it for a while and then stop for a while. Chu Feng would beat it until it lost its temper. Illiterate, if you have the guts, give me 2 years. When the time comes, I'll beat 10 of you with one hand. The toad's entire body emitted golden light and its eyes burned with raging flames as it shouted at Chu Feng. I don't need you to give me time. Right now I can fight 10 of you alone. Chu Feng continued to unleash heavy blows. The toad cried out, You're too shameless. Can't you be a bit more heroic? Let me go and we'll fight again 2 years later. At that time, if I lose again, I'll submit to you. Little brat, don't talk nonsense with me. I won't let you go. Finally, I'll give you an ultimatum. If you don't surrender, I'll roast you and eat you, Chu Feng said. With a bang, the toad was sent flying again. This time, Chu Feng carried it to the riverside to wash it. Next, his right palm glowed and burst into flames. He used the energy flames to roast the toad. Ayo! The toad cried out loudly. Its eyes rolled back in pain as it struggled with all its might. However, Chu Feng suppressed it. Energy surged from all over his body as he grabbed hold of the toad and directly roasted it. Ah, cooked. Let me go. The toad cried out miserably. Are you convinced? Yes. The toad was dispirited because it could see that Chu Feng was really going to roast it. How could a slippery creature like it wait to suffer physical pain? A toad that had spat out saliva during a great battle would never let itself become a piece of cooked meat for the sake of integrity. In the end, Chu Feng sat down and began to roast the fish. He tasted them and found them to be quite delicious. He handed a fish to the toad and asked, "Just what is your true form?" At the mention of this, the toad became dejected and rather vexed. It scratched its head and said, "I don't know what I am, either. Do you want to be roasted?" Chu Feng felt that this fellow was too dishonest and needed to be taught a lesson. "It's true, I'm not lying to you. When I was born, I was covered in scales like a true dragon. But not long after, I turned into a bird. Who would have thought I'd become like this after a while? I'm so angry. Other people become stronger and stronger, while I become more and more miserable. I've become a toad." It was furious as it ate the roasted fish ferociously. Chu Feng was puzzled. There was actually such a transformation? However, he felt relieved after recalling the golden scales and feathers. This fellow was indeed strange. "You're already so miserable now. What can you turn into next time? A cockroach?" Chu Feng laughed. Die. The toad roared furiously. It opened its mouth to spit at Chu Feng again. "I'm warning you, you're not allowed to spit in the future. It's so disgusting, especially when you're eating. If you dare do this, I'll throw you into the stove and roast you." The toad sighed. "Say, I'm getting more and more miserable each time. Will I really turn into something even more ridiculous next time?" It was very restless and disdainful of itself. It felt that its current body was too weak. Chu Feng had a lot of questions in his heart. "How long have you been born?" "How should I know? There's no distinction between day and night here. There's no concept of time at all." "No one taught you how to write oracle bone scripts?" Chu Feng asked. The toad was disdainful once again. "Illiterate, you don't understand, do you? That's energy language. It should be considered the common language of evolved beings. You dare call me illiterate? Don't you just know some ancient characters?" Chu Feng directly beat it until the toad rolled on the ground and begged for mercy. Only then did Chu Feng stop. "You're too crude. It's said that those who are educated will flourish. As expected, you're lacking." The toad didn't dare call him illiterate and was indirectly disdainful. Thump, 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 I'm convinced. Chu Feng subdued the toad with force and beat it until it had no more temper. In the end, the toad lowered its head in low spirits and didn't dare act arrogant anymore. "You hatched from a golden egg. Who taught you these characters? You know quite a bit and even know about evolved beings?" Chu Feng had all sorts of questions in his heart. The toad hung its head dejectedly but still told him some things. Countless years ago, it had been waiting to be hatched on Mount Tai in this pilgrimage ground. At that time, it already had some consciousness but would only wake up occasionally. Most of the time, it was in deep sleep. There was a period of time when some people discovered it and taught it the Tao through the eggshell. They taught it all kinds of characters which were transmitted into its mind through the eggshell. Chu Feng was astonished. Ancient evolved beings offering sacrifices to the heavens were a very ancient time. One day, many people discovered me and actually started fighting. They said I was a cursed divine egg, and that only heaven knows what would hatch out of it. And then there was no more, and then, after that, it fell into a deep sleep and only woke up in this era. In the end, it broke out of its shell. Chu Feng was astonished. This divine egg was cursed. Just what kind of thing was it? It had been on Mount Tai since ancient times and had experienced the era when ancient experts offered sacrifices to the heavens. This was truly astonishing and terrifying. Chu Feng asked, "Don't all divine beasts have bloodline inheritances? Can't you sense your own blood memories?" "No, I've been cursed. I didn't find any blood imprints." The toad shook its head. It felt that it was a true dragon, but it could also be a Kuan-pung, a phoenix, or even a qilin. Naturally, it was completely narcissistic. It said a lot in one go, and all of them were top-notch mythical creatures. There were no low-level ones. "I think you're just a toad," Chu Feng said. "I'll beat you into a toad in 2 years." It hooted out of indignation and dissatisfaction. "You're quite confident." Chu Feng laughed. "Of course. Although there's no day or night here and it's difficult to measure time, my intuition tells me that it hasn't even been a year since it hatched. It's only been born for such a short time, and it's already a bit weaker than you. In 2 years, I'll beat you so badly that even your mother won't recognize you." "Damn toad, you're asking for a beating." Bang, bang, bang. The toad cried out miserably as it was ruthlessly beaten up. Chu Feng's heart couldn't calm down because he felt that the toad's words made sense. It might really have been hatched not long ago, perhaps less than a year. That was because this was the time when the world was undergoing great changes. Was there any justice left in this world? It was only a year old, but it was already so powerful, surpassing many king-level entities. This bloodline was a bit too powerful. However, he recalled Yellow Cattle's words. Some of the powerful stars creatures were boundlessly terrifying. Even in their infancy, they could stand at the top of the food chain on Earth. Chu Feng suspected that the creature in front of him might be a descendant of an expert from one of the most highly ranked vital stars on Earth. Perhaps, suddenly, he thought of another possibility. Earth was once ranked 11th in the universe, and that was its most glorious period. Could this egg have been left behind by an expert from that era? That would be a big deal. "Are you sure you've been cursed? That's why you don't know what you really are?" Chu Feng asked. The toad's mood sank once again. "Yes, before I was even born, the worshippers here said that there was a problem with me and that they didn't know what I would become in the end." "All right, don't be sad. You've already become a toad, so how bad can it be? Maybe your luck will change next time and you'll transform into a tortoise, a mouse, or even an ant." "Don't say any more. Is there a scoundrel like you who comforts people? It's better if you don't change and stay like this." The toad was resentful. "Fine, fine, fine. Let's not talk about this anymore and strive to transform into an immortal. Let's leave this place first." Chu Feng got up. He brought the toad out of this area and crossed the void along the cobblestone path. Finally, they arrived in the outside world. "This is that divine beast." The old Grandmaster was dumbfounded. He had been waiting outside and didn't know what to say after seeing Chu Feng bring out a toad. "What are you looking at, smelly old man? Have you never seen such a handsome toad before? 500,000 years ago, I was a true dragon, a Kuan-pung and a qilin." The toad spoke confidently and looked down on the old Grandmaster of Mount Wudong. Chu Feng directly gave it a slap and said, "This is my master. I must respect him." "Respect my ass. I'm leaving. You two can go play on the side." The toad cried out in a strange manner and laughed heartily. It stood upright and rushed out with a swoosh. Its body was emitting a golden light as it ran away like a bolt of lightning. It was simply too fast. Its speed was more than 5 times the speed of sound and was comparable to that of Chu Feng in the past. But after being purified by the grinding stone, Chu Feng could reach 6 times the speed of sound for a short time if he were to go all out. This was a terrifying speed. Goodbye, illiterate. The toad's voice came only after it had almost run out of sight. It was laughing heartily as though a dragon had returned to the sea. However, its happiness didn't last long. Someone patted its shoulder as soon as it reached the foot of Mount Tai. Where do you plan to go? The Dragon Palace at the bottom of the sea. You ah! The toad responded subconsciously but ended up crying out in alarm. Chu Feng's speed was too fast. He immediately caught up to it and grabbed it. Bang, 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 it was another round of fat beatings. By the time the old Grandmaster descended the mountain, Chu Feng was sitting on the toad and treating it as a mount. He was doing his best to make it lower its head. I won't be your mount even if you beat me to death. I'm a divine beast, a saint beast, a supreme existence. Even evolved beings like demonic sages will have to be polite when I grow up. What right do you have to make me your mount? If you become my mount now, I'll remember your kindness and grant you immortality after I become a saint. You won't yield even if I beat you to death? Then I'll continue beating you, said Chu Feng. Stop beating me. You have to convince people with reason. You're too violent and crude. I'll use force to convince people. I'm convinced. The toad yielded once again and actually agreed to be a mount. That was because it had been beaten so badly by Chu Feng that its bones were about to break. Moreover, from the looks of it, it felt that this demon was capable of anything. Hopefully, he wouldn't really roast it. Didn't you say you wouldn't be my mount even if I beat you to death? Asked Chu Feng. I didn't beat you to death, did I? The toad had no moral integrity and wasn't the least bit ashamed. During the rest of the journey, Chu Feng tested the toad's speed. The old Grandmaster also sat on it because its body was as big as a house after its transformation. Its whole body was glowing with golden light and flowing with a golden glow. It looked fairly divine. Swoosh! Chu Feng was speechless because the toad was too good at jumping. Every time it jumped, it was as if it were riding on the clouds. It didn't take the normal path, and specifically jumped over the mountains. It's really uncomfortable to jump up and down like this. An ordinary person's body would fall apart if they sat on you like this, said Chu Feng. The toad was jumping up and down on purpose. It didn't want to carry them and said, "This is my body's current state. When I transform into a true phoenix one day, I'll definitely spread my wings and soar into the sky. You can jump, I'm not afraid. You can also be considered a divine beast. In the future I'll be a divine knight," said Chu Feng. The toad puffed up its cheeks and wanted to spit out saliva again. Was it really going to be a long-term mount? It wanted to eat Chu Feng, but unfortunately, it couldn't beat him. It decided to run away as soon as it found him. Chu Feng and the old Grandmaster didn't dare return to Mount Wudong because they had heard that an old Taoist was about to go crazy and wanted to settle accounts with Chu Feng. At the mention of the old Taoist, the people on the road revealed odd expressions. That Taoist seemed to be being chased by a dog, but they couldn't see where the dog was. "He's too vengeful, isn't he?" mumbled Chu Feng. The old Grandmaster was speechless. How could he not bear a grudge? Every time he circulated his energy, his butt would let out a dog's bark. Who could stand it? He definitely had to take revenge. The toad didn't mean what it said and said, "Where's the old Taoist? I hate Taoists the most. Let's go and settle accounts with him. I'll beat him to death." It asked the passers-by enthusiastically and wanted to chase after him. Chu Feng sat on it and beat it. Don't even think about borrowing his hands to escape. Let me tell you, that old Taoist is even more ruthless. I guarantee he'll throw you into a medicinal furnace and refine you into a divine beast pill. This world is too terrifying. Forget it, I'll go with you. The toad became listless. Many days later, after ascertaining the situation, Chu Feng rode the toad back to Mount Wudong with the old Grandmaster. After returning, he immediately laid down various domains and armed Mount Wudong. That was because he was afraid the old Taoist would come to settle accounts with him. Presently, he had too many magnetic stones and pieces of jade on him. There was a small mountain of them in his spatial bottle. On Mount Zhijin and Mount Tai, the various corporations had brought with them too many materials. Most of them had been stuffed into the pristine jade bottle. Luotian, your father says he wants to recruit Chu Feng as his son-in-law. What do you think? On this day, Jiang Luotian received a call from her mother and was immediately dumbfounded. At the same time, all the major corporations and some top-grade powers began to take action. That was because the impact of the trip to Mount Tai was too great. Once they gained control of Chu Feng, the various famed mountains would become defenseless as his attainments in the field of domains increased. They would be able to obtain terrifying fortunes in the future. Chapter 349. On Mount Putuo, the cliffs were sparkling and the Bodhi trees were everywhere amidst the rising golden mist. There were many ancient temples on the mountain top, illuminated by Buddhist radiance and a long and drawn-out bell. What? Marriage? Jiang Luotian cried out involuntarily. Her long skirt wrapped around her impressive figure, accentuating her undulating curves. She was enchanting and charming. It's not marriage, it's a search for a son-in-law, her mother corrected. Jiang Luotian had been meditating on Mount Putuo recently. This kind of national goddess with a Buddhist scripture in hand possessed a different kind of charm. But now, she was pale and scared out of her wits. She was naturally longing for love, but being told this by her family today was too sudden. I'm not moved by him, Jiang Luotian rejected quickly. It's just a suggestion. You can make friends first. A gentlewoman's laughter came through from the other end. On Mount Lao, a famed mountain occupied by celestial biology, some people were discussing this matter. Who would have thought this Chu Feng would be so powerful? He went to study domains after his path to evolution was severed and actually reached such a shocking level. He should be close to it. His relationship with Lin Naoi was good to begin with. It'll be safer to bring him to Mount Lao. Some people urged them to take action. Otherwise, Chu Feng might be lured away by other families. In just a few days, the outside world was filled with raging waves and turbulent winds. All of this was caused by the trip to Mount Tai. They had entered the sacrificial grounds of ancient evolvers and seen the grand sacrificial altar left behind from ancient times. This stirred up boundless waves. Peaches of immortality, 9 cauldrons, ginseng fruits. These earth-shattering offerings had only appeared in legends. In the end, they had appeared in the folded space on Mount Tai, shocking everyone. This was no longer a secret. Because too many people had gone that day, everyone knew of the existence of the city-sized sacrificial altar. Heavens, the peaches of immortality, the mutant fruit that Queen Mother of West invited immortals to a banquet. There's actually such a thing. Will I ascend if I can eat one? Countless people yearned for it, and a large group of people rushed toward Mount Tai. Stop dreaming. Even the various kings don't have the fortune to enjoy the peaches of immortality, let alone us. Besides, that's just a mutant fruit. It's hard to say whether Queen Mother of West existed in ancient times. They're all evolvers, not immortals or demons. In any case, everywhere was seething. Any evolver with some ability set off. Even if they knew that they would not be able to obtain anything, they still wanted to go to the pilgrimage grounds to take a look. The faces of the Hollow Jade Temple Master and the 8 Visions Temple Master were ashen and extremely unsightly. They viewed that place as their private land, but now they couldn't stop it. This was a great flood, a great tide that drew the attention of the entire world. That place became a place that all clans yearned for. It could be said that no faction could monopolize Mount Tai. The Hollow Jade Temple Master was filled with regret. His expression was gloomy because he had gone too far that day. He had missed out on Chufeng and lost a genius domain researcher. This was too great a loss for them. Now, there were countless people who had designs on Chufeng. The trip to Mount Tai had overturned everyone's understanding. Everyone realized that domain researchers were even more important than they had imagined. Even if Chufeng was crippled, he was still a strategic-level talent. Controlling him was equivalent to having the key to opening a famous mountain. Who wouldn't be tempted by the offerings on that altar? Any one of them was a rare treasure. As long as one obtained a peach of immortality, one could create an unimaginable expert. And this was only the beginning. What about the other famed mountains? There were divine mountains in every region. If they could open them one by one and enter the depths of the mythical land, they would surely evolve crazily. During these few days, many people were scheming and taking action. They wanted to use various methods to establish a relationship with Chufeng. Kidnapping him was a very direct choice because it was simple and violent. Perhaps it would produce the fastest result. Many people were mobilized to search for Chufeng's traces. They wanted to find him and kidnap him in secret. They knew that Chufeng had a good relationship with the old Grandmaster and had even saved the golden-winged roc, the mountain tortoise, and the other sect masters. Hence, it was best to carry out such matters in secret. Any price would be worth it if they could really capture Chufeng. Because of their hatred, there were people who wanted to kill Chufeng not long ago. But now, even his former enemies weren't willing to kill him and wanted to capture him alive. The significance was even greater. Only at this time did people realize that Chufeng had great foresight when he ran away from Mount Tai. It wasn't just to avoid the old Taoist, but also because he was afraid of being targeted by various parties. Of course, not everyone wanted to kidnap him because it was too violent and lacked artistic method. Some people felt that they should weave a net to trap him and make him willingly cooperate or even obey. During these days, countless evolved beings had arrived on Mount Tai. They were a dense mass of people and filled up a large area. Unfortunately, over 90% of them couldn't find the location of the altar. Even though Chufeng had broken the domains and opened up a safe path, it wasn't so easy for those who had arrived now. Those who had been here before had to lead the way for the experts who had arrived later. Only then would they be able to enter. But in the end, this group of people returned in low spirits after facing the altar. There was simply no way to deal with it. At this point, people realized that Chufeng's value was even higher. Up until now, Chufeng was the only one with great attainments in the field of domains. Others found it difficult to cross the threshold. Even with the relevant secret books, they couldn't find anything from their research. The Preaching Research Institute released news that they had excavated an ancient ruin and found a mysterious bottle of medicinal liquid. A single drop could cure all kinds of terminal illnesses. At the same time, they had tested it and found that the medicinal liquid was even more effective on evolved beings. It could even regenerate limbs. Chufeng is a heavenly genius. It's a loss for him to be crippled. We are willing to help him recover his evolutionary path. This was what the higher-ups of the Preaching Research Institute said. Afterward, an old dragon from the Eastern Sea spoke. He was the father of the dragoness, and claimed that he was searching for the dragonization fruit. If he succeeded, he would give Chufeng one to help him recover. Reportedly, the dragonization fruit was mysterious and unfathomable. Not only could it allow a flood serpent to transform into a dragon, but it could also allow experts to undergo an intense transformation and erase all kinds of calamities within their bodies. As some people saw it, a single dragonization fruit was enough to resolve the calamity as long as one wasn't dead yet. Even the Eastern Sea dragon race is involved. Aren't they afraid of offending the Southern Sea black dragon race? People cried out in alarm. The wolf had come, or rather, the dragon had come. Even the marine race wanted to participate in the fight for Chufeng. This made the importance of domain researchers even more apparent. Everyone knew the Eastern Sea Dragon race's objective. They wanted to open the true dragon's lair and borrow Chu Feng's strength. Many days later, there was finally news of Chu Feng. Some people believed that he had already returned to Mount Wudong. In the blink of an eye, people from all walks of life could no longer sit still. All of them wanted to take action. Yellow Cattle, how are you? On Mount Wudong, Chu Feng was contacting Yellow Cattle and inquiring about his condition. The group of great demons from Mount Kunlun had been lying dormant for a period of time and had yet to appear. There's no problem. I've already recovered. We're currently searching for high-quality mutant fruits and preparing to break through. Yellow Cattle informed Chu Feng. This group of people was unwilling to give up. That was because after the great upheavals, some of the latecomers had tried to overtake them. They had instead suffered hardships and their evolution had been obstructed. During these days, they had recovered but were in no rush to leave. Instead, they were searching the famed mountains of the West, hoping to evolve to the highest level. At present, the continental entities had all severed their sixth shackle. That was because no higher-grade fruits had appeared. They wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to break through to the peak of the King realm. Very well. Chu Feng nodded. He should also be prepared. Although he felt that he could sever his sixth shackle on his own, what if he had the help of a top-grade fruit? The evolution might be even more intense. At present, he couldn't act rashly because the little grinding stone was undergoing nirvana. It was enveloped by a membrane-like substance, and might be able to take another step forward. If he were to sever his sixth shackle on his own during this period, the blood energy in his body would be tossed about violently. This would affect the transformation of the black and white grinding stone. Amen. I'll first find a divine fruit and use it to sever my sixth shackle. I'll conserve my energy and blood energy to sever my seventh shackle later on. Chu Feng had made plans and arrangements in his heart. Perhaps at that time, he would be the first continental expert to sever his seventh shackle. For now, he would make a fortune in silence. He had already heard rumors that the major corporations and even the top powers of the West, as well as the overlords of the seas, wanted to cooperate with him. He felt that he would be letting these people down if he didn't kindly accept their gift. He would accept as many as he could. So much so that if any of the major powers requested to cooperate with him and had clues about a top-grade mutant fruit, he would definitely cooperate and help them digest some of the fruits. This would allow him to evolve rapidly. Currently, Mount Wudong had been set up with dozens of domains by Chu Feng. It was almost impregnable. Apart from the large amounts of materials he had obtained from the corporations, he had also dug up some rare magnetic crystals and spirit jades from Mount Tai. These things could support domains for a long time. Additionally, there were some simple domains left behind on Mount Wudong which had been discovered and activated by Chu Feng. Presently, this place was like an iron bucket that was difficult to break through. He was completely at ease. He felt that he could hold out for a while even if all the major powers were to gang up on him. Besides, did they really think he was a pushover? Once he displayed his might and revealed his true strength, it would be a scene of heads rolling. It would definitely shock the world. During these 2 days, Chu Feng was studying Mount Wudong. He was trying to open up the mysterious space here and see if he could obtain a great fortune. Zhenwu the Great Emperor, what level of evolved being is this? Chu Feng was wandering around Mount Wudong. According to the ancient records, this was Zhenwu the Great Emperor's ritual grounds. He revealed an odd expression because Zhenwu the Great Emperor was also known as Xuanwu the Great Emperor. There were some bronze Xuanwu statues on Mount Wudong. They were of a tortoise entangled by a snake. At this point, Chu Feng no longer believed in the ancient legends. Everything was viewed from the perspective of an evolved being. The Xuanwu evolved into a top-grade expert. What kind of medicinal herbs would there be here? There might even be a medicinal garden left behind by a demonic sage Xuanwu. Chu Feng pondered. He really wanted to open up the secret realm of the famed mountain and pick the divine fruit. At this time, some people were moving towards Mount Wudong for him. Some were generous and wanted to tempt him so that they could work closely together. Others were simple and violent, wanting to kidnap him directly. For a moment, the winds and clouds were stirring from all directions and shrouding Mount Wudong. It became the focus of many people's attention. We have to make a decision. I heard that the old monk from Bodhi Biogenetics is moving out personally. He might bring the so-called national goddess to Mount Wudong. On Mount Lao, a famed mountain occupied by celestial biology, some people were discussing countermeasures in secret. That old monk has an indestructible body. Buddha's aura is shining behind his head. I can't believe he would do such a thing. Does he want to be a matchmaker? Bringing Jiang Luotian along? The important members of celestial biology were greatly moved. Actually, we should take the initiative. Not to mention us, even the outside world knows that Naoi and Chu Feng were university classmates. Moreover, their relationship is not ordinary. Why not take it one step further? An old man spoke with flickering eyes. Don't take the wrong path. 21 years ago, no, it should be 22 years. Someone descended on Earth during that period. Although he's in hibernation now, he said something. Don't forget that Naoi isn't someone we can arrange. She's received special attention beyond our imagination. That's right, there's no need to say such things. Naoi is destined to leave this world. The so-called heavenly geniuses are far inferior to the divine sons of the outer realms. And those people will descend soon. They had also gone to ask the old woman about people like Chu Feng in the outer realms. They were told that domain researchers were rare in every realm. The old woman closed her eyes and didn't say much. That was because her master had already made arrangements for Linoi. She wouldn't speak carelessly. Let Naoi meet Chu Feng. He's actually a good child, someone said. Chapter 350. Mount Wudong was surrounded by mountain ridges and surging green clouds. Clear springs gurgled and waterfalls hung down, pouring down with divine radiance. This place was completely different from before. Chu Feng believed that there were even more powerful fruits within the mountain, nearby, or even just a few dozen meters away. All of this was because of the domains. They had blocked the entrance to the mysterious space and even enveloped a large, indistinct mountain. There was a mountain above Wudong. There was no need to doubt this. This was a Tao land and an ancient divine land. It was certain to contain ancient medicinal fields and large amounts of fortunes. But he was momentarily unable to enter even though he had sensed the aura. He was studying it and had grasped the doorway. He believed that he would be able to open up an even more majestic divine mountain at this rate. At that time, creatures with 7 severed shackles would be born because of him. They would belong to him, the old Grandmaster, and perhaps a toad. But Mount Wudong couldn't be peaceful these days because there were too many visitors. At first, Chu Feng received them personally because he was concerned about the gifts from the corporations. He accepted the goodwill of his former enemies with a kind attitude. He didn't feel the slightest bit guilty because he understood these people's intentions. They wanted to make use of his divine domain abilities. But after many days, he no longer paid them any attention. These people brought him large amounts of magnetic stones and jade pieces. He received them until his hands were cramping, but the domain books he was looking for were extremely rare. Even if they did exist, they were only a few yellowed pages and all of them were incomplete copies. They only whetted his appetite. Those people tactfully expressed that they would find a way to deliver the ancient domain books as long as he returned with them. This astonished Chu Feng. He had previously thought that there were only a few domain books on Earth, but now it seemed there were at least 5 or 6 of them. That was because he deduced from the remnant volumes he had come into contact with, that these domain books came from 5 or 6 different inheritances. Chu Feng was busy studying Mount Wudong, and thus didn't appear personally. He left the old Grandmaster to receive them, which disappointed many people. The old Grandmaster tactfully expressed, according to Chu Feng's intentions, that he would definitely cooperate with anyone who could deliver a complete book on domains. He could no longer evolve in this lifetime, because all his emotions and passion had been left to domains. The old Grandmaster blushed on behalf of Chu Feng as he said these words. As for that toad, it was squinting at the door in anger. Was that bastard crippled? Talking about feelings? How preposterous! What nonsense! If it was really crippled, it wouldn't have been beaten up so badly. It really wanted to tell these people that they were a group of greedy idiots. He, the bastard, was not crippled at all. This kind of cooperation was completely asking a tiger for its skin. However, it didn't dare to do so. Chu Feng had said that if it dared to say anything, he would give up on being a holy knight and directly announce its identity to the world. He believed that many people would be willing to capture this godly beast, and some people might even try to make it into a blood potion. Scoundrel, hoodlum, scoundrel! You actually dare threaten me! The toad was furious. Many people left in disappointment because Chu Feng wouldn't release the falcon until he saw the rabbit. He wouldn't go with them without the complete domain tome. At the same time, several peerless experts came to attack during these days. They actually joined hands to cause trouble and erupted with terrifying auras. However, all of them were blocked by the domains. That night, the old Grandmaster's expression was solemn. According to what he had said, he had sensed the arrival of some old friends with terrifying strength. Those 2 are even older than me. One of them is from the 8 trigram school, and was once invincible. He's actually still alive and is now almost 130 years old. The other is from the 8 extreme school, and is also 130 years old. Back then, he was extremely proficient in the fist technique and had almost cultivated a divine ability before the upheavals. These were the old Grandmaster's words. Late at night, he sensed a vast amount of blood energy appearing on Mount Wudong. In the end, they were blocked by the domains and couldn't break in. They retreated silently. Even Chu Feng was alarmed and rushed over from the back of the mountain. He was astonished that there were such powerful characters. He almost wanted to take action personally, but he was stopped by the old Grandmaster who didn't want him to be exposed. He told him that the 2 had retreated. That was because the old Grandmaster felt that Chu Feng's current state was the best. He was being roped in by all parties and wouldn't kill him even if they were hostile. Once the fact that Chu Feng had regained his strength was known, he would become a character that everyone feared. He would be guarded against and even targeted. Naturally, the most important thing was that the old Grandmaster was worried that Chu Feng would be targeted by the Outer Realm Descenders. He was currently not revealing his talents on the path of evolution. Even if the divine sons and fairies descended before long, they wouldn't cause trouble for him. On the contrary, they would try to rope him in because of his astonishing attainments in the domain. I don't have that many apprehensions, Chu Feng said with a thick face. I've always wanted to hunt down divine sons and saintesses. This is something I've had for a long time. Do you think they're wild beasts or birds? Hunting? The old Grandmaster shook his head. I'll act within my capabilities. I plan to capture 100 extraterrestrials and understand 100 inheritances. I'll subdue those who yield, warm the bed, that. The old Grandmaster. Why didn't you say so earlier if you had such a grand ambition? We're kindred spirit. I've always wanted to capture extraterrestrials. The toad came over with an excited expression. Scram to the side. You're just a year old. What does a little toad know? Chu Feng kicked the toad away and continued to study the domains. You're abusing a child. The toad was on the verge of tears. He had been beaten into submission recently because the other party was always subduing him with force. Chu Feng's peace didn't last long. He was disturbed the next day and couldn't concentrate on studying the domains on Mount Wudong. Little thief, come out. This Taoist grandpa is here. I'll beat you to death. The old Taoist finally arrived. He stood outside the mountain gates and called out to Chu Feng with a dark expression. Taoist, long time no see. I've missed you. Chu Feng appeared some distance away and waved at the old Taoist. Missed your head. You disgraceful brat, come out. The old Taoist's morale was unbearably low. He had suffered a huge setback on Mount Tai, yet this brat was still in the mood to tease him. He was truly fearless and too arrogant. But he didn't dare charge into the mountain rashly. That was because he could sense the extraordinariness of this place and the aura of domains pervading the air. Handsome big brother Chu Feng, long time no see. I've missed you. The problem lady waved happily and used the same words as Chu Feng to greet him passionately. Shut up. The old Taoist was furious. He didn't want his grandson to flirt with that despicable brat. Tisk. The rebellious girl rolled her eyes at him. She didn't seem to care. Although she wasn't big, she was at least 170 centimeters tall. Her waist was slender, but her chest was bulging. Her face was as exquisite and beautiful as a demoness. Every time Chu Feng saw her, he would want to ask the old Taoist how he raised this child and what he fed her. She was only about 12 years old, yet she had already grown into a calamitous demoness. How great would she be when she grew up? Wasn't she too mature and charming? In the end, he accidentally asked this question. This angered the old Taoist so much that he pointed at him and cursed him for being filthy and impure. Old Taoist, don't speak nonsense. I want to say that you have improper thoughts. Why did you raise a 12-year-old Lolita into such a state? What evil intentions do you have? The old Taoist was so angry that his beard was curling up after seeing Chu Feng throwing dirty water at him. His so-called sage-like temperament had completely disappeared. Brat, come out. Let's have a good talk and resolve our grudges. Otherwise, you know the consequences, the old Taoist threatened. Grandpa Taoist, I want to ask, how did a monk like you have a granddaughter? Little sister, did he force you to call him grandfather and keep you by your side? Does he have ulterior motives? Boundless deity. God damn it. The old Taoist stomped his feet. His finger was trembling as he pointed at Chu Feng and threatened him with death. Grandpa Taoist, why are you cursing people? Chu Feng laughed and deliberately taunted the old Taoist. That was because he felt that this old Taoist was a good-for-nothing. Last time on Mount Tai, he would have been in big trouble if he didn't have the black and white grinding stone with him. Barking like a dog while circulating energy, that scene was simply too miserable. The little demoness was also giggling. She seemed quite happy to see her grandfather suffering a setback and didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. Handsome big brother, you're too amazing. You don't know my grandfather's identity. He's known as the invincible old scourge. In order to descend to earth, he— Shut up! The old Taoist glared at her to stop her from speaking further. The problem lady stuck out her tongue. Although she was always going against her grandfather, she didn't dare to speak carelessly on such matters. Chu Feng's heart was in turmoil. He recalled what Yellow Cattle had said. The more powerful a being was, the harder it was for them to descend, and the price they had to pay was enormous. He stared at the old Taoist for a long time. At the same time, there was no longer any need to seek confirmation. This grandfather-granddaughter pair was definitely descenders. This made his heart restless. He had originally thought that this old Taoist had appeared 22 years ago and had gotten married on Earth with the little demoness. But now, it seemed that wasn't the case. Little sister, it seems we're fated. How about I invite you up the mountain? Chu Feng extended an invitation. Sure. The problem lady nodded happily. She blinked her large eyes and waited for Chu Feng to take her in. It's fine. Just walk forward boldly. The current domains are very safe, said Chu Feng. The problem lady was quite bold. After hearing these words, she didn't hesitate at all and ran inside, afraid that her grandfather would stop her. Heh heh! The old Taoist sneered as he watched his granddaughter walk forward and form a path. Then, he turned into a gale and chased after her. Brat, you're too arrogant. Do you think this Taoist grandpa is a weak cat? You think I can't follow you in? However, he soon experienced what it meant to be one step in heaven and one step in hell. The path ahead was blocked and the ground was glowing. The surroundings were filled with mist, and he could no longer see his granddaughter's shadow. Grandpa Taoist, I'm sorry. This is a domain I comprehended on Mount Tai. It can change at any time. Yes, it can also be controlled by me. You can study it slowly. The old Taoist was stopped as the problem lady went up the mountain. He said, Brat, let me go in too. This Taoist grandpa only wants to pay his respects. I heard this is a Taoist holy land. I want to light a stick of incense. Grandpa Taoist, you're still an extraterrestrial who came from millions of miles away. You must have some boldness. How about we write off the enmity between us? In the future, we can work together to plunder famed mountains and rob other extraterrestrials. You have a high cultivation, and I'm a domain researcher. It's a win-win situation. The more the old Taoist listened, the more he felt it was odd to be called an extraterrestrial. Enough nonsense. Let me in. The old Taoist continued to threaten. Chu Feng laughed mischievously. Since that's the case, I won't be polite. Grandpa Taoist, I'll rob you first today. There's no helping it. Your hostility towards me is too strong, and your granddaughter is in my hands. Take out all the valuable treasures on you and throw them up the mountain. Otherwise, I'll rape you first. Brat, you dare rob me? The old Taoist cried out angrily. As for his granddaughter, she wasn't the least bit afraid. On the contrary, she cried out excitedly, Brother Chu Feng, quickly rob me. I definitely won't run away. Little evil creature, are you trying to anger me to death? The old Taoist cried out oddly. Chu Feng naturally wouldn't harm the problem lady. On the contrary, they were chatting happily as they watched the old Taoist charge through the domains. In the end, the sounds of barking could be heard. The old Taoist circulated his energy as the barking from his but rang out incessantly. The old Taoist was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. This is really... Chu Feng didn't know what to say. Brother Chu Feng, this kind of symptom can be resolved. When your attainments in domains reach a high level in the future, you can help my grandfather relieve his worries. The little demoness wasn't without conscience. She was still very considerate of her grandfather during critical moments. In the end, the old Taoist didn't go up the mountain. On the contrary, the problem lady was quite happy on the mountain and stayed there for a couple of days. Afterward, people from Bodhi Biogenetics arrived. The century-old monk brought a silver-colored book, which he handed to Chu Feng. He told him that this was a collection of Bodhi Biogenetics, and that it was a complete book on the inheritance of domains. Chu Feng was moved. This was something he greatly desired. With this kind of book, he would be able to open up the famed mountains. There's also a letter from Luotian inviting you to Mount Putua, said Master Qianjia. In the end, she didn't come but sent someone to deliver a letter. Following which, the people from Celestial Biology also arrived with a letter from Linoi, inviting him to Mount Lao. On the same day, a situation appeared in outer space. Some probes captured images from the depths of outer space and saw several beams of light flying over. In the end, the space probes captured the scene clearly. A number of entities appeared in the void outside of Earth, all of them glowing. Descenders, extraterrestrials had arrived. Chapter 351. A total of 4 specks of light appeared in outer space like gods, emitting a divine radiance. On the ground, the relevant higher-ups of various countries were all shaken. What kind of scene was this? A creature had arrived from the cosmos and was already approaching Earth. As it got closer, a creature could be clearly seen. It was humanoid, with a pair of snow-white wings and long golden hair. It was a sight that made people's hearts tremble. "Oh God, have you arrived?" On the ground, someone's voice was trembling. Their breathing had become hurried as they stared fixedly at the screen. This scene made their souls throb. Soon after, this humanoid creature approached a satellite. It seemed to be somewhat surprised. It stood on top of the satellite and followed it along its orbit at an extreme speed. Nearby, 3 other creatures were approaching. One was a jet-black bird of prey, and the other was a brightly colored tiger. In addition, there was a young woman with a slender figure. Her purple clothes and long black hair fluttered in the wind. They were all glowing, and it was quite dazzling. The extraterrestrials have arrived. They've truly appeared. Earth is about to undergo great changes. Many people were trembling in fear. That was because no one knew what would happen next. The unknown was always frightening. At this time, the man with a pair of pure white wings and a head of long golden hair was standing on the satellite. He seemed to be saying something. "Quick, can we capture the alien's special signal? Can we decipher what he's saying?" A relevant personnel on Earth asked anxiously. This was a matter of great importance and had far-reaching effect. At the same time, someone cried out in alarm because another mysterious signal had been deciphered. This wasn't coming from outer space, but rather had been received earlier. It was only after a period of time that it was truly deciphered. "Sir, this is a signal captured by an even more distant space probe. It was transmitted a while ago, but it's only been deciphered now," someone reported in a certain space research base. The same thing was happening in some of the world's powerful countries. There was the latest news, or to be more precise, the old transmission signal had just been deciphered. At this time, a newly deciphered signal appeared in front of the higher-ups of several powerful countries. It had been converted into a picture. It was something happening in a place slightly further away from Earth. That place was originally somewhat dark, hazy, cold, and silent. But all of a sudden, a terrifying beam of light appeared. The space in that area split open as if it had been inlaid with a silver edge. It abruptly tore through the darkness. Of course, it was more like a bolt of lightning. It was so sudden that it broke the silence. Many people cried out in surprise at the sight of this. Some people wanted to say that this didn't make sense. However, ever since the upheaval, there had been too many things that didn't make sense. They couldn't be judged by common sense. Following that, a few figures rushed out. They were the 4 creatures. A man with a pair of pure white wings on his back, a pure and holy woman in a fluttering purple dress, a black bird of prey, and a colorful tiger. This was the first image captured, but the space probe there suffered from intense energy interference. Some parts of it were damaged, and the transmission was incomplete. The decoding process was difficult, so it was only now that we managed to decipher it, an expert in the space field explained. This was the earliest scene, and it explained where the 4 creatures came from. This was extremely astonishing. The dark space outside of Earth suddenly exploded, and they rushed out from within. Is this a different kind of wormhole technology? A few experts were trembling. Their eyes were wide open, and they wished they could be there in person. The wormhole was a narrow passage that connected 2 different spaces. With the means and technology on Earth, it was currently impossible to master it. Now, they saw that the 4 creatures had used this kind of technology to come over. For a moment, the upper echelons of Earth were silent after seeing this scene. They found it hard to accept that the creatures that walked the path of evolution weren't much different from the gods and devils of legends. But now, it seemed that they had also grasped black technology. Perhaps the path of science and technology and the path of gods and devils are different paths that lead to the same destination. Was this enlightenment, or was it the intrinsic truth? Perhaps in ancient times, some ancestors had already grasped this kind of black technology. Ferocious beasts rampaging, eating raw meat and drinking blood, accompanied by black technology, this was truly difficult to accept. It just so happened that there were space probes nearby. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to capture such an unbelievable scene. Look, they're moving. The four creatures kowtowed solemnly after coming out from the silver crack. It was as if they were carrying out some kind of solemn ceremony. Heavens! People cried out in alarm. They were deeply shaken, and even their souls were trembling. The scene they saw was simply too astonishing. There was an extremely large hand within the silver crack. Even from such a distance, one could see its majestic aura, but it was very indistinct. The four people were kowtowing to that large hand. It slowly retreated and gradually disappeared into the crack. Everyone realized that it wasn't that the four creatures were heaven-defying or excessively ferocious, but rather that large hand. It was it that had sent them through the wormhole. In the end, that place closed and the silver crack disappeared. The narrow passageway connecting two different space-time had thus disappeared. Remember the coordinates there. There's a hidden wormhole there, and behind it is a brand new world. Someone shouted, but no one responded. So what if they remembered? What would happen to the people of Earth if they went there? In the eyes of those godlike creatures, perhaps they were only ants. Everyone was silent. The scene that they saw was too shocking. Following which, the four people moved. They all took out different kinds of objects and emitted divine radiance. Some of them held silver paper in their hands. When it glowed, it was covered in tadpole characters. Others held banana leaves with many characters written on them. If Chu Feng had seen it with his own eyes, he would certainly have cried out in surprise. These silver paper and banana leaves were similar to the golden arhat paper. They were the crude works of powerful evolvers. When the silver paper and banana leaves glowed, the tadpole characters on them were reflected. Only then did the space probe capture them. Following which, the four creatures were wrapped in light and tadpole characters and rapidly approached Earth. That was how they arrived at the beginning. Now, some of them were standing on the satellite, while others were flapping their wings and flying around the satellite's orbit. It was a shocking scene. "Sir, they're trying to contact us on the ground," someone shouted in pleasant surprise. "It's good that there's communication." They were most afraid of these creatures being cold and indifferent. That would be troublesome. Now, it seemed the situation wasn't that bad. Very soon, the news spread. It wasn't just limited to the upper echelons and major powers. Many people had heard of it. Chu Feng also knew about it and saw some clear images. That was because some major corporations had come to discuss cooperation and told him about this matter in order to curry favor. Now, the people looking for him were not only from the East, but also from the major powers of the West and the marine race in the ocean. "Extraterrestrials," Chu Feng whispered. He felt a sense of urgency. He had to become stronger and quickly establish himself in an invincible position. Otherwise, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. Of course, he believed that the four creatures wouldn't dare come down for the time being. Once they did, they would have to charge through a trial of life and death. If they could come down directly, they wouldn't have opened a wormhole outside of Earth. "How strong are these extraterrestrials?" the toad asked with a grin. He was still looking askance at people. This had become a habit. The old Grandmaster was also worried and frowned. He could already be considered a peerless expert on the continent and could be ranked within the top 10. But now that the Outer Realm Descenders had appeared, the current situation would be overturned and all kinds of balances would be broken. They won't be ridiculously strong. After coming out of the wormhole, they relied on the crude works of the evolvers to fly to Earth. They didn't rely on their own strength, said Chu Feng. Handsome big brother, my grandpa wants to talk to you. He says he doesn't want to get angry, and has already calmed down. The little demoness ran over. She had already stayed at Mount Wudong for 2 days, and had traveled all over the place. As for the old Taoist, he was still at the mountain gate and hadn't barged in. Dog barks rang out incessantly during these 2 days. The old Taoist was truly indignant. When he thought about his identity in the outer realm and the miserable situation he was in, he really wanted to bang his head against the wall and die. In any case, he was a scourge-level old fellow. In the end, he had failed to take liberties with a little brat on Mount Tai and was instead schemed against. Moreover, that little bastard was still so arrogant and constantly angering him. He had softened because he had also heard the news that people from the outer realm were about to descend. After thinking it over, he still wanted to reconcile with Chu Feng. That was because Chu Feng's identity and ability were of the utmost importance in the upcoming battle for the famed mountains. He could imagine that a great battle would erupt on Earth as the extraterrestrials kept appearing and the divine sons and fairies passed through the trial of life and death. Moreover, it would be a chaotic battle involving many parties and countless orthodoxies. Many ancient vital stars would be involved. At that time, it would be much easier to seize the famed mountains with Chu Feng's troop. Naturally, the ultimate goal wasn't to seize the famed mountains and harvest the mutant fruit. There were also the cave residences on the famed mountains, and even the residence and orthodoxies of that peerless expert ranked 11th in the cosmos. At the same time, the old Taoist had heard that there were some other strange and unfathomable things on Earth. As such, he wanted to seize them. Moreover, so many extraterrestrials, saintesses, and Tao children had come to compete. Wasn't it all for the sake of becoming saints? Perhaps it was time for a saint to appear on this withered earth. Chu Feng reconciled with the old Taoist and made him swear all kinds of malicious oaths to guarantee that he wouldn't retaliate. The old Taoist was so angry that he almost tore off his beard. It wasn't because Chu Feng had forced him to compromise, but rather, those oaths were too bizarre and vile. It was simply too difficult to say. Brat, how perverted are you? What kind of heavy taste is this? Are you tired of living to make me swear such oaths? The old Taoist was unbearably angry, but in the end, he still compromised. However, he was almost beaten up when Chu Feng let him go up the mountain. The old Taoist flew into a rage. According to him, those bullsh *T-O's and inner demon O's were all nonsense. He simply didn't believe in them. He said with disdain that Chu Feng had read too many mythological novels and that he really believed there was such a restriction. Naturally, he didn't go overboard and really didn't dare beat up Chu Feng. That was because the barking on his butt could only be dispelled by a domain researcher. He threatened Chu Feng that he had to get rid of the barking at all costs. Don't worry, Taoist Grandpa. We might even be one family in the future. Let's not talk nonsense. Just wait and see. When my attainments in domains reach a high level, I guarantee I'll cure your butt. Brat, what are you saying? Cure my butt? That's too unpleasant. The old Taoist didn't like what he heard. Following which, his eyes widened and his old face darkened. That was because he had seen Chu Feng flirting with his granddaughter. He immediately realized what the so-called family meant. Little thief, I'll beat you to death. How dare you seduce my granddaughter? Only you and me will survive. Damn, you shameless old man. It's your granddaughter who's throwing flirtatious glances at me. What's the meaning of this? You want to fight over your granddaughter? You really have a heavy taste. Big brother Chu Feng is so handsome. The little demoness rolled her eyes in dissatisfaction. Oh my God, your relationship is really messy. The toad was still squatting at the door and was still looking askance at them. It clicked its tongue and watched the show. The old Taoist was already in a rage. Then, he happened to see a toad looking askance at him. He was immediately displeased and said furiously, A toad dares to look at me like that? I'll kick you to death. He sent his foot flying. The toad cried out miserably, "Ah, you shameless old man! You old pervert!" The old Grandmaster watched from a distance and was speechless. This place was really in chaos. Chu Feng had read Jiang Luoshan's letter and Linoy's. In the end, he agreed to go with Bodhi Biogenetic. That was because his heart was shaken after he finished reading the silver book delivered by Grandmaster Qian Jia. This was a secret tome of astonishing value. It was an inheritance that all domain researchers desired. It was extremely complete and contained many things. To him, it was a priceless treasure. This secret tome contained many domain mysteries and allowed Chu Feng to see a whole new domain. Grandmaster Qian Jia smiled in satisfaction because Chu Feng had agreed to go with him. Chapter 352. The old Taoist left, saying he was going to find the Qilint's abandoned lair and leave with his granddaughter. But as the toad saw it, the old Taoist was afraid Chu Feng would seduce his granddaughter. The toad prided itself on being righteous, so such words came out of its mouth. In the end, the old Taoist ran back with a swoosh and beat the toad up. The toad was incomparably angry. It watched the old Taoist go into the distance and began to curse loudly until the old Taoist had disappeared. It swore that it would definitely beat the old Taoist to death after a year and a half when its strength had improved greatly. Chu Feng set out with Master Qian Jia toward Mount Pudu. The toad didn't want to go at first, but Chu Feng wanted to use it as a mount and carry him on his journey. As for the old Grandmaster, he stayed on Mount Wudong and didn't go with them. Master Qian Jia was speechless along the way. Chu Feng was using a toad as a mount? He really didn't know what to say. But he was somewhat astonished after seeing the toad's leg strength. That was because this toad was too good at hopping. It would charge toward the mountains and would leap over them in a single bound. It was as though it were riding the clouds and traversing the ridges. At first, Master Qian Jia still followed, but in the end, he felt that the path was too difficult. The toad would always hop along the steep cliffs and not the main road. "Great Master, please come up and follow me to Mount Puduo on the toad." Chu Feng invited him calmly. Master Qian Jia felt quite embarrassed, but in the end, he still sat on the toad's back. That was because the toad didn't walk the normal path, and it was quite strenuous for him to follow. Along the way, some evolvers were dumbfounded after seeing this. The toad was hopping happily as it carried two people south and east toward Mount Puduo. Did you see it clearly? That's Chu Feng, the only domain researcher on Earth. Where is he going? Why is he riding a giant toad? 4 entities have appeared in the outer realms. Reportedly, they're negotiating with the humans. Once they descend, they might capture domain researchers first. Chu Feng will be out of luck. People were discussing this matter. The news was immediately leaked. This was especially the case for Master Qian Jia. His bald head shone brightly, and his body shone with golden light. He looked like an accomplished monk, and many people immediately guessed his identity. The person responsible for delivering the letter to Chu Feng from Celestial Biology contacted the people from Laozhan after leaving Wudong Mountain, informing them that the invitation had failed and that Chu Feng had left with the people from Bodhi Biogenetic. On Mount Lao, a group of people frowned and discussed countermeasures. Naoi personally wrote a letter, and that so-called national goddess also sent a letter, but Chu Feng actually chose to go to Mount Puduo? This was beyond their expectations. In their opinion, Chu Feng would come to Mount Lao. Who would have thought that Bodhi Biogenetics would intercept him? Even Linoy was somewhat lost in thought after receiving the news. She was also on Mount Lao, cultivating in seclusion and didn't participate in those meetings. Reportedly, Qian Jia brought a complete secret tome on domains with him. This moved Chu Feng, so he followed him on his journey. Very soon, they received a report. This was information Chu Feng had asked the old Grandmaster to spread. He didn't mind revealing the truth. That was because Chu Feng was more than happy to cooperate if someone was willing to deliver such an ancient book. What price can a deity like us pay for a divine item? Don't tell me Naoi is going to appear personally? Or should we also deliver a domain tome and cooperate with him? On the way, Chu Feng felt that something was wrong. He had been targeted. Along the way, the toad didn't take the usual route. It was indeed jumping quite happily, but it wasn't as fast as the flying bird. That was because there were too many obstacles on the ground. Although it was jumping happily, the distance it traveled wasn't very far. Swoosh! Astral winds whistled about. An enormous ferocious bird with feathers that were extremely beautiful like a phoenix swooped over. It was surrounded by multicolored light. It was fairly direct and caught up without the slightest bit of concealment. "Brother Chu, please wait," someone shouted from the air. It was a purple-robed man with outstanding looks and an imposing appearance. He was standing on the back of the gorgeous bird king with a smile on his face. He was rather old-fashioned because the purple robes he was wearing were ancient clothing. However, they were quite new and self-made. "Who are you?" Chu Feng was puzzled as he looked back at the sky. "My name is Li Xinghe." The purple-robed man introduced himself and asked Chu Feng for forgiveness for rushing over without notice. There were young men and women on the Bird King's back. They weren't very old, but each and every one of them was brimming with energy and vigorous blood energy. All of them were top-grade kings. This shocked Chu Feng greatly. He simply couldn't believe it. Chu Feng wasn't afraid even if there were several of them working together. He was confident that he could slap them to death if they really dared to make an enemy out of him. What astonished him was that these people were all so young and had severed their sixth shackle. This was too excessive. Although Chu Feng understood that with the intensification of the upheavals and the acceleration of global evolution, more and more experts of this level would appear, it wasn't a big deal. But it was still too early for that. Chu Feng knew that the Baji school had produced Gao Yuan, whom he had encountered at Lake Xuanwu in Jiangning City. He also knew that the 8 Trigram school had produced young experts with 6 severed shackles. He had also killed a number of fairly strong youths who had submitted to the Hollow Jade Temple on Mount Tai. But they were only exceptions. There were a few who had severed their 6th shackle and were quite young. But now 4 people had appeared, and all of them were so young. The oldest was only 27 or 28, while the youngest wasn't even 20. Were they trying to defy the heavens? There were both men and women among them, and all of them were quite good-looking. The men were handsome while the women were beautiful. Their innate genes were quite good. "Brother Chu, I've long since heard of your great name. It's a pleasure to meet you today." On the gorgeous Bird King, a pretty lady spoke. She was also dressed in a traditional style with a long skirt that danced in the wind. Her skin was fair and she possessed an otherworldly temperament. Her name was Yu Hanji, and she announced her name. With a swoosh, the bird landed on the ground amidst surging gales. It was difficult to tell what its true form was, but its feathers were indeed bright and resplendent. It raised its head proudly. It was actually a bird king with 6 severed shackles. Chu Feng was speechless. 4 youngsters, Li Xinghe, Yu Hanji, Lu Wenqing, Su Mei, and a powerful bird king. This was indeed an exaggerated combination. Where had these young people come from? Could it be that they had found a divine land, entered it by mistake, picked the divine fruits, and transformed together? This was too absurd. These young people had actually severed their 6th shackle. Chu Feng sighed. He felt that it was quite odd. There shouldn't be many such young evolved beings who could surpass others at this level. Most of them were old demons. Master Qian Jia was moved. That was because, relatively speaking, he was older than all 4 of them combined. This made him somewhat speechless. Chanting sutras and practicing martial arts, this was the result of a solid foundation and deep accumulation. Only then did he have his current accomplishments. But these random youngsters were already so powerful. This was too shocking. Comparatively speaking, only the toad was the calmest. It glanced askance at the group and curled its lips with a disdainful expression. It indeed had the capital to do so. In terms of heaven-defying, no one here could compare to it. It was less than a year old and was already a top-grade king-level entity. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Master Qian Jia sighed emotionally. He was known as a disciple of Buddha. Now, it seemed that these youngsters were even more extraordinary. Li Xinghe jumped down from the Bird King's back with a smile. The others followed suit and walked over together. Chu Feng was astonished. He really didn't know these people's origins. He could say that they were from the outer realms, but no matter how he looked at them, they all possessed the aura of earthlings. Their strength was extraordinarily high. Moreover, some of them were wearing old-fashioned clothing. It was quite odd. Of course, there were also some among them who were wearing cool modern clothing. For instance, Su Mei was wearing a t-shirt that didn't go past her waist and revealed part of her snow-white belly. Lu Wenqing, on the other hand, was wearing casual sportswear. Chu Feng revealed a puzzled expression and inquired about their origins. Yu Hanji's countenance was as beautiful as the moon. She said with a smile, "To tell you the truth, we're from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave at the North Pole." Chu Feng was moved and astonished. That was because he had once killed that Han Fei from the Celestial Biology Department and obtained a lot of information from him. It had been almost 22 years. At that time, the heaven and earth had undergone great changes but on a small scale. Even so, descenders had appeared. These people were now in hibernation. Some of them were in the Origin Magnetic Cave at the North Pole. Where did these youngsters come from? This moved Chu Feng greatly. No wonder they had all severed 6 shackles. "You guys are descenders?" Chu Feng asked. In truth, he didn't quite believe it because these people didn't seem very old. He felt that they should be people like Han Fei. As expected, they smiled and told Chu Feng that they were merely descendants of descenders. Chu Feng was greatly moved and became vigilant about the Origin Magnetic Cave. It seemed there were many descenders there, and not only the foundations of celestial biology were slumbering there. Li Xinghe spoke, "Master Qianjia, we have some matters to discuss with Brother Chu Feng. Can you please go ahead? We'll send Brother Chu Feng to Mount Putua in the future." Afterward, he invited Master Qianjia to one side and communicated telepathically. It seemed they were discussing something. In the end, Master Qianjia revealed a solemn expression and didn't say a single word. He seemed to be hesitating about something. He walked back and glanced at Chu Feng. "Master, do you have any difficulties?" Chu Feng asked. "Ba," Master Qianjia chanted. Su Mei spoke. She looked to be less than 20 years of age with fair skin and a charming appearance. But now, her expression was solemn. "The main thing is that we have something we need Brother Chu Feng's help with. After discussing it with Master Qianjia just now, we wish to borrow Brother Chu for a few days. Of course, we were too presumptuous this time. We will compensate Brother Chu." "What is it?" Chu Feng asked. "We wish to invite Chu Feng to the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave," Li Xinghe said solemnly. "Then," he added, "to be exact, it's near the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave." Chu Feng was shaken. There was definitely a nest of extraterrestrials near the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave. He actually wanted to go there? But in the end, he nodded in agreement. That was because they had revealed a shocking discovery there and wanted to invite Chu Feng's help. When the time came, they would gift him divine fruits. Chapter 353. Chu Feng nodded in agreement. He really wanted to go to the North Pole and experience the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave. "Great Master, please." Li Xinghe smiled at Qianjia and asked him to return to Mount Putua. The old monk put his palms together and chanted a Buddhist chant. He paid no attention to Li Xinghe, and his voice rang out in Chu Feng's mind, "I'll send you back to Mount Wudong." Chu Feng was startled. He could hear the helplessness in Qian Jia's voice. The old monk had remained silent for a period of time because of the threat. But in the end, he wasn't willing to compromise. The youths appeared kind but were actually quite fierce. It was obvious that the old monk was a righteous person and wasn't willing to leave Chu Feng behind. As he saw it, these people wanted to capture Chu Feng because they were gentle and domineering. Some people wore smiles and appeared kind, but in truth, they were even more tyrannical. They would make tactful requests, but they would make sure to follow their opinions. Doubtlessly, these four were like that. There was tyranny hidden within their gentleness. That kind of domineering attitude was restrained. Chu Feng gave it some thought and said telepathically, "It's fine. Great Master, feel free to leave." His spiritual fluctuations were very weak, which was in line with his strength that had fallen below the king level. Master Qian Jia had lived for over 100 years and was known as a disciple of Buddha. His martial arts were ridiculously powerful, but back then, he wasn't lucky enough to become a peerless expert. After the ice and snow melted and the world underwent rapid changes, he obtained a powerful mutant fruit and severed his sixth shackle. His abilities were extraordinary, and he even possessed Buddhist divine abilities. He was currently very powerful and didn't fear challenges. However, he was apprehensive of those from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave. The Descenders were a hurdle that no expert on Earth could bypass. Doubtlessly, those extraterrestrials were unfathomable and extremely terrifying. These youths were their descendants and had great origins. "I can guarantee that I'll send you back safely." The old monk's voice rang out in Chu Feng's mind. His eyes were resolute. He persisted even though he knew he would offend the Descenders' descendants. "Great Master, you should be on your way." Li Xinghe smiled indifferently and urged him. Chu Feng already knew that the old monk was being threatened. Now, he naturally felt the tyranny behind this smile and felt indignant for the old monk. At the same time, he felt that he was being gently humiliated. This was indeed equivalent to kidnapping him. However, Chu Feng did not flare up. He felt that there was no need to shed all pretense of cordiality. He could slowly play with them along the way. He really wanted to go to the North Pole and visit the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave. If the geographical conditions there allowed it, he was prepared to find an opportunity to wipe out a nest of extraterrestrials. In the end, Chu Feng continued to send a telepathic message to Grandmaster Qian Jia. "Grandmaster, please return. I appreciate your kindness, but I'll be fine." He spoke very directly and told the old monk not to worry. He was a domain researcher and indeed wanted to go to the North Pole to see what was going on. Just what kind of terrain and what kind of place could actually be called an immortal cave, making those people fall asleep. He felt that there were other reasons other than the mysterious magnetic field. The old monk was helpless. In the end, he sighed, turned around silently and left just like that. "Master, have a safe journey. We won't be seeing you off," Yuhanji said with a smile. If he didn't understand the inside story, Chu Feng would have felt that these people were quite elegant. As descendants of Descenders, they didn't put on any airs and were rather amiable. But after finding out that the old monk had been secretly threatened and seeing their current attitude, he felt that they were absolutely arrogant and domineering. Chu Feng pretended not to know and went on his way happily. Li Xinghe, Yuhanji, Lu Wenqing, and Su Mei glanced at each other and revealed satisfied smiles. As Chu Feng approached the Bird King, this powerful and top-grade beast king revealed an untamed expression and glared coldly at him. Chu Feng's expression was unhappy. Even this Bird King was looking at him with such a cold and arrogant expression. He was immediately angered. "Come here." Chu Feng beckoned and called the toad over. The toad hopped over and, just as before, glanced sideways at this powerful bird king covered in bright feathers with a disdainful expression. The bird king was very arrogant and looked down on Chu Feng. It was immediately enraged when a toad suddenly appeared and glanced at it. It raised one of its claws and stomped forward in a bid to kill the toad. Even the whistling astral winds almost brushed past Chu Feng and enveloped him within. "This is my mount. Don't injure it or I'll leave immediately," Chu Feng said quickly. "Stop!" Li Xinghe shouted. He wanted the Bird King to stop and not kill indiscriminately. The Bird King shot a cold glance at Chu Feng and the toad. It raised its neck arrogantly and said in a crisp voice, "You better be careful. If you disrespect me again, I'll kill you immediately." This was a female Bird King. Although she was threatening the toad, she was also targeting Chu Feng. "Brother Chu, please don't mind her. Kaiying calls us brothers and sisters. Her temper isn't that good," Yu Hanji said with a smile. At the same time, she glanced at the toad with a frown and a trace of disgust. Women definitely didn't have a good impression of this kind of thing. In the end, the toad returned the favor and glanced at her. Naturally, it was a sidelong glance. The group was momentarily speechless. The pretty and smiling Yu Hanji's expression froze. If she didn't need Chu Feng's help, she would have already stomped this toad to death. "Then let's go." Su Mei smiled. She was wearing skimpy clothes and had an excellent figure. Her snow-white abdomen was revealed and her waist was as slender as a willow. "Okay." Chu Feng nodded. He then glanced at the toad and said, "Go up." The toad wasn't careless. Without saying anything further, it scuttled up with a swoosh and wanted to land on the Bird King's back. How dare you?" The Bird King let out a shrill cry. It was still a woman's voice, but she seemed flustered and exasperated. Her voice was sharp and shrill as she flapped her wings with all her might. Li Xinghe spoke, "Brother Chu, I think there's no need for you to bring your mount along. With Kaiying here, thousands of kilometers can be crossed in an instant. Just let it stay." The toad fell to the ground with an aggrieved expression. It felt humiliated and glanced at Chu Feng. This fellow really knew how to put on airs. Yu Hanji frowned slightly. She really hated this toad and didn't want it to sully her mount. She also asked Chu Feng to leave the mount behind. Chu Feng shook his head and said, "That won't do. I've encountered many dangers since I was crippled. This mutant toad once saved my life and even became my mount. After I became a domain researcher, I swore that I would bring it with me at all times and never leave it." The toad was stunned. It wanted to roll its eyes and say, "Do you still have any shame? You were the one who captured me by force and beat me up every day. You tortured me into submission, okay?" The toad really wanted to curse, "Scram as far as you can. How disgusting and shameless." Of course, Chu Feng was fairly natural. He was stroking the toad's head gently, but he was actually pressing down on its slanted eyes. It wanted to cast a sidelong glance at Chu Feng. Li Xinghe and Lu Wenqing were fine, but Yu Hanji and Su Mei's expressions were stiff. They pinched their noses and endured the displeasure as they agreed to bring the toad along. Swoosh! The toad jumped directly onto the Bird King Kaiying's back. This infuriated the Bird King, but it had no choice but to accept. Its body began to tremble uncontrollably. "Disgusting toad," it muttered. In truth, these were also Yu Hanji's true thoughts. Her eyes were full of disgust and she couldn't even hide it anymore. However, she resisted the urge to explode. Croak, croak, croak! The toad began to cry out as if it was responding to something. It was extremely hateful. "Don't look down on it. Look, its skin is as lustrous as jade and has a faint golden luster. I feel that it's a divine beast but has been cursed. Although I'm crippled, from a certain perspective, I'm a divine knight now." Chu Feng was trying to find something to say, which made Yu Hanji's expression turn increasingly unsightly. Li Xinghe laughed. "Brother Chu Feng is really humorous. He was naturally pinching his nose as he spoke. What divine beast? To hell with it. It was still understandable if it was a three-legged golden toad, but wasn't this just a toad? Su Mei laughed tenderly. Her large eyes, snow-white abdomen, and waist were sparkling and alluring. Perhaps it really is a divine beast. The toad raised its head proudly as if it were looking down on the world. It seemed to be saying, "You've just discovered that I'm a divine beast." In truth, Yuhanji really wanted to kick this toad to death. That attitude was simply courting death. Along the way, they sped toward the north at lightning speed. The Bird King, full of anger, accelerated continuously at a shocking speed. It indeed possessed extreme speed. None of the various supersonic bombers and flying machines could compare to it. Most importantly, it would clench its teeth and increase its speed again after a short rest. 2 or 3 hours later, they entered the northern prairie and arrived at the border between Inner and Outer Mongolia. "Stop, we'll land on the prairie," said Yuhanji. "Aren't we going to the North Pole?" Chu Feng asked. Even Li Xinghe and Lu Wenqing looked at her with odd expressions. "That's because there seems to be an entrance here. We can try it from here," said Yuhanji. Li Xinghe nodded and glanced at Chu Feng. "Brother Chu, we won't hide it from you. We're going to explore a cave residence that was once an unimaginably glorious holy land." But he was secretly asking Yuhanji, "Aren't we going to start from the entrance at the North Pole? This might not be the true path." "No rush. I want to size up his attainments in the field of domains first. It's useless to bring him to the North Pole if he's far from our requirements. Additionally, there might be an entrance here. It's worth a try," Yuhanji said secretly. Li Xinghe, Yuhanji, Lu Wenqing, and Su Mei communicated telepathically for a short time without letting Chu Feng sense it. Finally, they came to an agreement that they could start from here. "What orthodoxy is it?" Chu Feng asked curiously. "An orthodoxy that once illuminated the entire cosmos. It's unimaginably powerful and revered the heavens and myriad realms." Su Mei licked her bright red lips. "Yes, an orthodoxy that once shook the entire cosmos and caused Earth's ranking to be extremely terrifying. The ruins they left behind are worth excavating." Lu Chenggu, who had been silent all this time, also nodded. Yuhanji added, "Brother Chu, there might be some heaven-defying divine medicine in such ruins. It'll help you recover and once again step onto the path of evolution." In the end, they landed on the prairie and arrived before a stone mountain. There was a vast expanse of lush green as far as the eye could see. There was grass everywhere, and there was only a single stone mountain here. Li Xinghe told Chu Feng that the entrance was here. This was the tomb of a divine Khan from ancient times, and was suppressing an even more ancient passage. Apparently, this wasn't the first time they had come here but had always returned in low spirit. There were domains here and an ineffable power was preventing them from entering the underground. Chu Feng frowned after arriving here. His current research on domains was quite extensive. Not only did he have the domain heavenly book he had obtained from the extraterrestrial civilization, but he had also studied the large number of stone diagrams the dragoness had brought back from the Eastern Sea True Dragon's lair. Now, Bodhi Biogenetics had gifted him with a silver-colored secret tome on domains. It could be said that these were all rare secret tomes that touched upon different domains. Although he couldn't be considered profound and hadn't studied them thoroughly, his knowledge was already extraordinary. Hence, after arriving here, Chu Feng immediately saw that this place was extraordinary. This was an extraordinary terrain. There was only a solitary mountain here in the boundless prairie. The rocks here were hard and connected to the sky. "Actually, this is a tombstone," said Lu Wenqing. "According to them, there was a divine Khan in ancient times. At that time, the earth hadn't completely declined yet. That overlord of the prairie was a terrifying expert in the field of evolution. His abilities were exceedingly high. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been revered as a divine Khan. Chu Feng was astonished. He had never heard of such anecdote. These extraterrestrial descendants were actually able to find such records. The connections and resources they possessed were truly terrifying. He could only sigh. It seemed that organizations like the Preaching Research Institute and the Archaic Alliance were experts in excavations and archaeology. They must have cooperated with the Descenders. Li Xinghe said, "We speculate that the reason why that divine Khan was so powerful was because he had obtained bits and pieces of the most powerful orthodoxy on earth. There must be a reason why his tomb was built above one of the entrances." Chu Feng became vigilant. He knew that these people wouldn't allow him to roam freely after he returned to human society. They were determined to force him to serve the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave. Once they found that holy land and opened the inheritance, they would probably silence him immediately. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression. He was naturally fearless. As he saw it, cooperating with the extraterrestrial descendants wasn't bad. With them scouting the way and finding such ruins, the benefits would be unimaginable if they were to excavate it. Chu Feng walked around the 1,000-meter-tall stone mountain and revealed an astonished expression. How was this a tombstone? It was an object that could draw in the sun. This was a land of extreme yang and absolutely terrifying. Once it was detonated, it was likely that the 9 suns would fill the sky and the cries of the golden crow would be heard. The scene would be terrifying, but he was delighted and not afraid. That was because he felt that he could try and perhaps he could really open it. That was because this kind of terrain had been recorded in the secret manuals he had studied. Those people revealed odd expressions as they watched Chu Feng walk around and carefully measure every inch of the land. "He's quite obedient and quite easy to use," said Li Xinghe with a faint smile. Li Xinghe said with a faint smile on his face. Right now, he didn't have the attitude of someone who was courteous to the wise. Instead, he had a prideful expression. They believed that Chu Feng had long since been crippled and couldn't hear their words. "He's quite tactful. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind using extreme methods to make him kneel while surveying the domains," said Lu Wenqing. His words weren't much, but they were quite destructive. "I want to kill that toad. That Chu Feng must also suffer." The bird king Kai Ying transformed into her human form and turned into a beautiful young lady. "Don't worry, I'll help you vent your anger in a while. First, I'll throw that toad into the divine Khan's tomb and let it die a miserable death." Yuhanji laughed. She then shot a glance at the distant Chu Feng and said, "We still have to make use of this person. He's very valuable and can't be touched for the time being. We'll only consider silencing him after he's done shining." She spoke casually as though she had already arranged Chu Feng's fate. Her tone was cold and arrogant, completely different from her previous gentle attitude. Chu Feng heard everything clearly from a distance. His divine instincts were too sharp and far surpassed these people. He only pretended not to hear and revealed a mocking smile. Since these people had spoken like this, he wouldn't be polite in a while. He had to thank them for bringing him here and helping him find an ancient divine tomb. Chapter 354. Su Mei was chuckling. Her pearly teeth were sparkling, and her lips were red and sexy. Only she didn't say anything. Her beautiful eyes glanced over at Chu Feng's back. Yuhanji spoke. "Su Mei, don't tell me you're love-struck again? Could it be that you're trying to recruit a son-in-law for your father?" "Oh, it's quite possible considering Chu Feng's identity." She was also laughing, but it was tinged with ridicule. Her tone was somewhat disrespectful toward Chu Feng, and was clearly different from her previous gentle attitude. "Enough, be careful. Don't let that toad hear you. Look at how it's jumping around. It won't be good if it's a mutant with extraordinary divine instincts." Li Xinghe cut them short and didn't let them continue. But the cold smile on his face was a clear indication of his attitude toward Chu Feng. In truth, The toad's divine instincts were even sharper than these people. However, it wasn't angry at all and continued to roam about in the distance. It was quite happy to hear these people belittle Chu Feng and was secretly delighted. Bang! Chu Feng kicked it away. He couldn't flare up against those people just yet. Seeing the toad rejoicing in his misfortune, he naturally vented his anger on it. Didn't he say that he would never leave that toad? That toad had saved his life before, so he was quite attached to it. Why did he kick it? Lu Wenqing muttered. Found it. There's an entrance to the tomb here. We can go in, Chu Feng shouted from afar. It was precisely from the place where he had kicked the toad away. Swoosh, 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 the group rushed over. Even the bird king in human form, Kai Ying, had landed here to observe in detail. That was because this entrance was different from the one they had found last time. Kai Ying couldn't help but reveal a mocking expression. What a domain researcher! He couldn't even find the entrance? Sir, the true entrance to the tomb is on the mountain. There's a cave there, Li Xinghe reminded. At this time, he was once again amiable in front of Chu Feng. Do you really understand domains? You can't even find the correct entrance, Kai Ying whispered with a mocking expression. That's a dead end. We'll be roasted if we go in. The earth flames are boundless. This is the only way out, said Chu Feng. Having said that, he ordered a few people to start digging from here. Let this bird do it. It should be able to find something with just one swipe of its claw, suggested Chu Feng. How can you say that? Kai Ying was furious. Let me do it. Lu Wenqing smiled. He opened his mouth and spat out a beam of light that resembled a flying sword. With a poochie sound, it shattered the grassland. The sword light was like a tornado that carried the soil and flew to the side. This was the Gengjin Qi in his lungs. It was marvelous, and even Chu Feng was moved. That was because this was also a kind of method. It was said that among the sword immortals of ancient times, there were some who practiced flying swords, and some who nurtured a stream of Gengjin sword qi in their lungs. When they reached a high level, they were invincible and could kill enemies from 100 miles away. Stone slabs appeared beneath the meadow's soil. There were patterns on them, patterns that belonged to the ancient era. They looked crude, but they left behind a special mark of an era. Everyone was shocked. Was there really another secret passage? Kai Ying was instantly speechless and didn't know what to say. Chu Feng didn't take action because he was now a cripple and had fallen from the king level. He let the others dig. Yu Hanji, Li Xinghe, and the others usually ordered others to do things. Now, they could only pinch their noses and obey Chu Feng's instructions. This area was cleared out and revealed a large number of stone slabs carved with unimaginable things like flying yikshaws and ferocious wolf totems. There were also some unknown creatures. Be careful. There's a great tomb after we uncover this area. As expected, a pitch-black burial ground appeared after the stone slabs were opened. There was a moldy smell and an aura of decay. There's no flame. Last time we went in, we encountered a divine flame and were almost killed. Su Mei was astonished. But why is there a rotten smell here? It's like a mortal's tomb and not the tomb of a divine Khan, said Yu Hanji. Chu Feng shook his head. I don't know either. I'm only looking for a safe path and grasping the pulsations of domains. As for other things, I definitely don't know anything about tomb raiding. Su Mei chuckled. Brother Chu, don't you know? Some of the tombs of saints were buried with the help of domain researchers. They're all located in the ultimate forbidden areas. Your domain is actually quite vast. Chu Feng was speechless. In truth, he wasn't afraid of anything if they were to start from the domain aspect. He was somewhat expectant. Could it be that the tombs of evolved beings were all buried in special mountainous terrains in accordance with the logic of domains? Are there many saint tombs on those ancient vital stars in the outer solar system? He was somewhat expectant. Saints are difficult to destroy. Those forbidden areas are rare, But there are always some. Li Xinghe smiled. Yu Hanji was secretly disdainful. She transmitted telepathically to the others, saying, "It's important to know one's own limit. This person won't amount to much. It's laughable that he wants to lay his hands on a saint's tomb. Let's go. Don't think too much. He's of great use to us now. Who cares what happens to him in the future?" Following which, they went deeper into the tomb and saw many stone tools. Then, they saw a large number of bronze burial vessels. Chu Feng was astonished. Such things existed in ancient times? As expected, there were gaps in civilization. That was because, according to them, this divine Khan's tomb had existed for at least tens of thousands of years. This was a large tomb. It looked majestic and occupied a large area, but Chu Feng didn't find anything related to evolved beings after walking around. This place was the size of several football fields and was extremely vast. Chu Feng returned to the surface and measured the land once more. He observed the terrain in detail and finally opened his eyes after a long period of contemplation. Let's go in and continue digging after reaching the tomb. With free labor, it would be a waste not to use it. He could order them around with ease. Although Lu Wenqing and the others wore smiles on their faces, they were actually quite unhappy. They had found a domain researcher but didn't do anything. Instead, they had to dig the tomb and transport the earth and stones away. To the descendants of descended beings, this was a coarse and lowly job. In the great tomb, after Chu Feng had observed every area, he did some calculations and confirmed a location for the group to excavate together. They had dug hundreds of meters deep and had long since left the scope of the tomb. They were heading towards the depths of the earth, following which the soil gradually changed. This area was boiling hot and the soil was dry and hard. Occasionally it would emit sparks. Suddenly, Lu Wenqing exerted a bit of force and the ground below caved in. Moreover, there was a loud boom and several meters of flames erupted, almost engulfing them. Chu Feng didn't go down but could see everything clearly from above. Those people rushed over as fast as lightning. All of them had angry expressions on their faces as they looked towards Chu Feng. "Chu Feng, what's going on? There's a divine flame below. We almost fell into danger. Do you know anything about domains? It's very safe standing up there. You won't have a good ending if you were to risk our lives." Apparently, these were their true thoughts. Moreover, they could berate him whenever they wanted. The group felt that this experience was similar to last time. They were almost killed and all of them were gloomy. They stared coldly at Chu Feng and unconsciously revealed their true nature. Chu Feng said, "Don't worry. It looks dangerous but it's actually quite safe down there." Lu Wenqing, Yu Hanji, and the others' eyes flickered. They felt that they had gone too far and that it wasn't good to treat Chu Feng like this. They revealed smiles once again to dissolve the awkwardness. Li Xinghe said, "Brother Chu, please don't mind us. We really felt our lives were in danger just now and almost had an accident. That's why we spoke without thinking. Don't worry, I'll go down with you guys this time. I think we've found the right path. We'll reach the Pure Land after passing through those flames. There should be fortunes there." Chu Feng spoke and asked them to bring him down. "Brother Chu, I'll bring you down," Su Mei said with a smile. Her large, limpid eyes were quite charming. She wrapped her arms around Chu Feng and walked down the mountain. The others also followed. The toad sighed upon seeing this. It cursed inwardly, "What's the use of being handsome? Isn't it just being embraced by a beauty?" Could jump down on its own, so it directly jumped down. When they arrived at the collapsed area, it was actually a sea of fiery red light. The temperature was frighteningly high. "Jump down and we'll reach the Pure Land after passing through this fiery zone," said Chu Feng. The group glanced at each other in disbelief, but didn't act rashly. "I'll go scout the path first. Remember, when you come down later, jump straight down and don't touch the flames in the distance." At this point, Chu Feng jumped down on his own. He directly disappeared from this place. The group wore serious expressions. Should they follow him or not? At this time, the toad came down. Li Xinghe's eyes turned cold. He grabbed it and threw it into the sea of flames. Croak, croak, croak. The toad was crying, but it was actually cursing. If it wasn't for Chu Feng telling it to endure, it would have started a massacre. Grandson, you dare throw me? I guarantee I won't beat you to death in a while. The toad was crying. Of course, it was only croaking in their ears. Why didn't you squish it just now? The bird king mumbled. Not now. We'll kill it when we need to scout the path again, Yuhanji whispered. It was at this time that Chu Feng's voice came from below the flames. Come down, it's very safe. This place is very mystical. After hearing this, the group hesitated for a moment before jumping down one by one into the sea of flames. As expected, they passed through the layer of flames after falling straight down without being burned. Next, they saw a bizarre scene. Below the sea of flames was a peaceful land. It was as warm as spring and glowed brilliantly like a pure land of the gods. The ground beneath their feet was lustrous and had a faint golden hue. It was completely different from the decaying tomb above. Additionally, there were no terrifying and dangerous flames either. This place was full of light, and it was hard to imagine that this was the depths of the earth. This is the true ancient divine tomb. This area is the true burial ground of that divine Khan, Chu Feng said. At the same time, the collapse just now was the only place to enter the tomb. He had found the correct path. The group was astonished. They acknowledged Chu Feng's domain attainments and became much more courteous toward him. Chu Feng took a step forward and told them not to barge in recklessly. Soon after, they were shocked to see faint golden radiance in the depths of this pure land. There was a coffin floating in the void. Around it were meteorites arranged like stars, gathering around it at the center. The great tomb of a divine Khan. Lu Wencheng was very excited. He was itching to rush over. A tomb of the god of sin must contain something of astonishing value. The coffin was suspended in the void, and so were the meteorites. Radiance was shining from between them. As they walked forward, they were gradually shocked. They felt as though they had shrunk like ants while the tomb grew larger and larger until it was like a mountain. Additionally, the meteorites were also in the same state. They were majestic and terrifying. At this time, they looked up at the distant sky and the coffin. It was as though they were gazing at a river of stars. A divine tomb, it's definitely an ancient divine tomb. Could it be that this place is really connected to a starry sky? Yuhanji was shaken. Chu Feng ignored her. He felt that the coffin was too dangerous and didn't break the domains easily. At this time, a fruity fragrance arrived from afar. It was so dense that it made people want to drool. Although this pure land was glowing and even the soil was glowing, there were very few plants. The fruity fragrance naturally attracted their attention. There was a region far in the distance. There were flames jumping about and the fruity fragrance wafting out from there. Li Xinghe said, "Let's go and see what kind of mutant fruit has matured. It can't be something that can help us sever our seventh shackle, right? According to reason, the revived plants haven't evolved to that level yet." Chu Feng led the way while paying attention to whether there were any domain trap. They finally arrived. There was a small tree amidst the flames. Its trunk was as thick as an arm and 3 feet tall. Its entire body was glowing with golden light, and its leaves were like pine needles, very thin and long. Without careful observation, it looked like a golden pine tree. There were 2 resplendent golden fruits on it. The fragrance became even more intense after arriving here. Divine solar fruit? Li Xinghe was astonished. That's right, it looks quite similar. But doesn't this thing only grow on meteorites close to the sun? How can it grow underground? Yuhanji cried out in astonishment. The divine solar fruit was an exceptionally difficult mutant fruit to find. There was only a minuscule chance of a mother tree growing on meteorites facing the sun. This kind of thing was extremely difficult to find. As they saw it, it was impossible for such a divine tree to grow underground. Only Chu Feng knew that this underground region was different. There was a large amount of extreme yang essence flames condensed here. Once it erupted, the 9 suns would fill the sky and the cries of the golden crow would fill the air. He was also staring at that mutant tree. It was simply too dazzling and resplendent. The dense essence flames flowed about and the fragrance of the fruit pervaded the air. It made people drool. The toad immediately started drooling and hurriedly went to wipe it. The bird King Kai-ing said disdainfully, "Idiot!" The toad was furious and really wanted to slap her to death. Li Xinghe observed for a while and said, "Yes, this isn't a true divine solar fruit. Those things grow under harsh conditions and are difficult to find even after searching through many solar stars. If this fruit experiences the baptism of time and is continuously nourished by the essence flames of extreme yang, it might turn into a divine solar tree and bear divine fruits. Even so, this mutant fruit must have powerful medicinal effect. I wonder if it can help us evolve." Yuhanji blinked her beautiful eyes. They were filled with incomparable hope and fervor. "Brother Chu, do you have a way to pick it?" Lu Wencheng asked with an expression of incomparable desire. The few of them didn't dare to act rashly because the aura of extreme yang essence flames was very dense in that area. They were afraid that picking the golden fruit would draw fire to themselves. This was especially true in such an unknown and mysterious region. They didn't dare to act recklessly and were all quite apprehensive. "I might be able to give it a try if I have enough good materials," said Chu Feng. "Heh, Brother Chu doesn't need to worry about this. We've long since made preparations." "Here are some rare materials," said Li Xinghe. He was wearing a dark gray bracelet with no luster at all. It could be said that it wasn't outstanding at all. However, he had taken out a large pile of magnetic stones from within. This was, without a doubt, a spatial item. Chu Feng's eyes were sparkling as he stared at the bracelet. Li Xinghe was very satisfied with his expression and said, "Ah, Brother Chu hasn't seen it before, right? This is carved from a rare spatial stone and its interior is 10 cubic meters." Apparently, he still didn't know that Chu Feng had a spatial bottle on him. If he knew that the pristine jade bottle could inexplicably contain 800 cubic meters of space after being burned once on Mount Zhijin, he would have been so greedy that he would have killed Chu Feng for the treasure. "Brother, there's no need to be envious. This item is indeed extraordinary. If I can find another spatial stone in the future, I'll gift it to you." Li Xinghe patted Chu Feng's shoulder. Although Chu Feng's eyes were sparkling, was it envy? Obviously not. He was just staring at a big fat sheep. Afterwards, Chu Feng was moved. That was because the magnetic stone, or perhaps it should be called a magnetic crystal, was a rare material that wasn't commonly seen on Earth. He understood that this was something he had brought out from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave. Perhaps only such a place could produce magnetic crystals. "Very good, this won't be a problem. I should be able to pick that precious medicine that resembles the divine fruit of extreme yang," Chu Feng said happily. How could he not be happy? He felt that it was a pleasant surprise to be able to borrow the power of this fruit to evolve. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Before long, Chu Feng tossed out the rune-carved magnetic crystal into different areas. Immediately, the patterns interweaved and formed a domain. Within moments, the essence flames around the golden tree disappeared. The raging flames sank into the ground and were drawn away by an ineffable power. "Can I pick it now?" Lu Wencheng was impatient. "Not yet." Chu Feng shook his head. In truth, it was completely fine. However, he continued to carve runes on the magnetic crystal and then tossed it out. He laid down another domain and caused the area around the small tree to become hazy and gradually disappear. "What's going on?" Li Xinghe frowned. That area seemed to be isolated from the outside world. "Yes, this is the wondrous effect of domains. I'm trying to divert the essence flames of extreme yang, but I don't know if it'll work. I'll go in and take a look, said Chufeng. The others nodded in agreement. Chufeng seemed to be very cautious. He moved slowly and finally disappeared from their sight. After entering, he immediately plucked a golden fruit and bit into it. Within moments, a strong fragrance filled his mouth as golden light blossomed within. This feeling was simply too wonderful. This fruit was exceptionally delicious. Swoosh! A figure flickered and Lu Wenqing arrived just in time to see this scene. He was immediately furious and said, "God damn it, are you courting death? Who do you think you are to dare touch our divine fruit? Put it down and come over to accept your death." Just now, he was worried and had followed along the path Chufeng had taken. He had arrived just in time to see the latter eating the mutant fruit. Chufeng immediately slapped Lu Wenqing. It was too fast and landed a slap on Lu Wenqing's face. The latter's body was sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth and nose. How noisy! I originally wanted to endure you guys for a while, but in the end you're so insensible. I plucked the fruit with my own ability, but in your eyes it's disgraceful. Are you treating me like a slave? Chufeng sneered. This place was isolated from the outside world, so he wasn't worried that the people outside would hear. You! Lu Wenqing was astonished. Chufeng could actually slap him flying? Then, he leapt up and spat out sword chi from his mouth. He immediately launched a killing blow and called for the people outside to come in. Unfortunately, the people outside couldn't hear because they were separated by the domains. But another slap landed on Lu Wenqing's face and sent him flying by Chufeng. He was both shocked and furious. His face was in so much pain that he felt humiliated. What kind of situation was this? Why did the monthly votes suddenly double? Everyone, please vote for the kidney deficiency. Chapter 355. The soil was glossy and the little tree was 3 feet tall. It was like a golden pine tree rooted in the ground. Apart from this, there was no other vegetation. Lu Wenqing was lying on the ground with stars in his eyes. His ears were ringing and blood was gushing out of his nose and mouth. The little tree was right in front of him, but it seemed very far away to him. He was furious. A person he had captured to do labor had actually dared to touch the mutant fruit he coveted and even injured him. This was a great humiliation to him and made him extremely angry. The person he thought was crippled had actually slapped him twice. The sound was crisp and clear. His face was swollen and his teeth were completely loose. It was simply too humiliating. The perpetrator, the one who had thought his path of evolution had been severed, was eating the mutant fruit in an ostentatious manner. The fruit's fragrance was so strong that it couldn't be dissolved. Lu Wenqing crawled up once again with bloodshot eyes. You're dead for sure. Do you know who I am? You'll die without a burial. His eyes were cold as he stared at Chufeng like a poisonous snake. No one had ever dared to do this to him, to slap him in the face like this and to rob him of his fortune. You're really stubborn. You don't know life from death and you still dare to threaten me? Chufeng nibbled on the mutant fruit while walking forward in an intoxicated manner. At this moment, he felt all the pores on his body relax. His whole body blossomed with golden light and was filled with the fragrance of the fruit. This mutant fruit was simply too wonderful. Lu Wenqing felt that something was wrong. He had already called out loudly, but why didn't the people outside come in? This place seemed to be isolated from the outside world. It was completely silent. Chufeng narrowed his eyes and his body was as light as a feather. He had never tasted such a delicious fruit before. It was smooth and tender, incomparably sweet and fragrant. It was like a century-old wine that could intoxicate one to the bones. At this time, he had even forgotten that the mutant fruit could accelerate his evolution and was purely enjoying this delicacy. Chi. Lu Wenqing took advantage of Chufeng's dazed expression to spit out a metallic sword chi. It rushed up from his lungs and gushed out from his mouth and nose with terrifying destructive power. This was a different kind of flying sword that was even more powerful than a tangible one. Moreover, this was a secret technique. Ordinary people would not be able to grasp it at all. Without the incantation, casually practicing it would harm one's lungs, obstruct one's path of evolution, and even cripple one's body. Chu Feng's eyes suddenly lit up. He lifted his foot and kicked over. Facing the sharp lung lobe gung metal chi, he directly collided with it. "Idiot, you're courting death," Lu Wenqing sneered. From his point of view, no matter how strong a body of flesh and blood was, it could not compare to the gung metal sword chi nurtured in his lungs. It was destined to be severed. However, the soles of Chu Feng's feet were glowing and energy was boiling. This was the god's legs. Other than raising one's speed to an inconceivable level, it also had an extremely terrifying strength that could cause mountains to collapse with a single kick. How powerful was this energy? It was especially so now that Chu Feng had the small grinding stone in his body that could purify all the energy in his body. As a result, the quality of his energy rapidly increased, causing his god's feat to be like a divine art. Otherwise, it would be quite troublesome to deal with the metal chi nurtured in his lungs. With a bang, Chu Feng's foot landed on the sword light, causing it to explode. The metal chi scattered in all directions and actually turned the soil and rocks on the ground into metal. This was a strange transformation. At the same time, Chu Feng kicked Lu Wenqing away, causing his chest to cave in and many of his bones to break. He coughed up large mouthfuls of blood. Pow! Following this, Chu Feng kicked out again. The surface of his foot swept across Lu Wenqing's face, causing his teeth to fly out and his entire body to fly into the distance. He fell to the ground, his heart filled with terror. His vision darkened and he almost fainted. He resisted the fatigue and forced himself to stay awake. Lu Wenqing opened his mouth with great difficulty and said, "Let me go, or you won't be able to live either. The people outside have already noticed that something was wrong and must have contacted our elders." His tone softened. At the very least, he was much more humble than before and didn't dare to be domineering anymore. "Delicious, the taste is too wonderful." Chu Feng's words were so relaxed as if he hadn't heard him at all. "Chu Feng, don't misjudge. Even if you're not crippled, so what? You're not a match for a descender. Once you kill me, my elders will surely take action. You're not their match at all." Lu Wenqing retreated. At this time, his face was pale and his heart was filled with terror. Seeing Chu Feng in such a posture caused his heart to sink. Chu Feng nibbled on the fruit and felt the fragrance all over his body increase rapidly. The vitality of his cells was so powerful that it was like a surging tide. So comfortable. He stretched his limbs and walked forward. With a bang, he kicked Lu Wenqing and sent him flying more than 100 meters away. While in midair, Lu Wenqing's bones and tendons were broken and his mouth was full of bloody foam. In the end, he landed in an area with a weak flame and let out a miserable cry. That was because a blazing flame had suddenly risen there. That was the extreme yang flame essence. It had been drawn out and directly engulfed him. Lu Wenqing let out a blood-curdling scream and rolled on the ground. In the blink of an eye, his flesh was torn and his bones and tendons melted. It was a tragic sight to behold. That was because this was extreme yang flame essence. Not to mention his body, even an even stronger expert would die. At present, no one on earth could resist such a rich essence flame. "Chu Feng, you won't die a good death. The people outside must have noticed that you dared to treat me like this. They'll report this to my father and tear you to pieces." Lu Wenqing howled miserably. "I'm really embarrassed for you. You keep talking about your father, but he's just a fart. You only have yourself to blame for your current ending. Acting so domineering, Do you really think Earth is a private land for descender descendants like you? Chu Feng sneered and didn't seem to care in the slightest. He had long since wanted to eliminate these people because they were too arrogant. They had captured him and made him their free labor. They looked down on him and even tried to silence him while discussing in private. As far as Chu Feng was concerned, there was only one outcome for such people: to stomp them to death. He wasn't worried at all. This domain was isolated from the outside world, so how could the people outside know what was going on inside? It's not good to stomp them to death. I'm still prepared to cooperate with them. After all, the resources and information they possess are astonishing. Chu Feng muttered to himself. If it weren't for these people, he definitely wouldn't have been able to find the great tomb of the ancient tribe's divine Khan and pick the golden mutant fruit. Only one is enough. If I slap the others to death, who should I leave? Chu Feng was hesitant, but this would decide the fate of those people. Outside, Li Xinghe and Yu Hanji were somewhat impatient and revealed odd expressions. Why is Lu Wenqing dawdling like this? He's been in there for some time. Why hasn't he come out yet? Yu Hanji mumbled. I'll go take a look, said Li Xinghe. He was worried that Lu Wuzhou would take everything for himself. They had originally agreed to share the golden fruit with him to refine medicine. I'll go in with you, said Yu Hanji. The two of them walked side by side, cautiously, following the path that Chu Feng had walked on. Li Xinghe entered first and immediately smelled the refreshing fragrance of the fruit. He just happened to see Chu Feng nibbling on a fruit with golden radiance filling his nostrils. He immediately exploded. How preposterous! There were only 2 fruits on that tree, but Chu Feng had eaten one? Chu Feng, how dare you do this? Do you know what you're doing? He berated loudly. His previous cultured elegance had completely vanished and his face was ashen. You actually dare eat our fruit? You're courting death. Yu Hanji screamed in exasperation after entering. You two are very disgusting. Aren't you just descendants of descenders? You're so proud and self-righteous. Do you think everything good belongs to you? Chu Feng stared at them. Li Xinghe and Yu Hanji's expressions immediately turned ashen. At the same time, they discovered that something was amiss. They had a bad premonition that things weren't good since they didn't see Lu Wenqing. Swoosh, swoosh. They retreated rapidly, wanting to leave this place first and settle the score with Chu Feng later. They were descendants of descenders. A single order and countless people would serve them. Although they were quite decisive, they felt their scalps go numb as they retreated. They could no longer leave because the original path was blocked. The domains had closed up. You native, do you know your identity? Yu Hanji shouted. You're the most disgusting woman. You speak as if you're all extraterrestrials. Isn't your mother an earthling? Chu Feng mocked. You dare speak to me like this? Yu Hanji screamed. Her beautiful countenance was ashen. Chu Feng taunted. Who do you think you are? You think you're infallible. If you like the outer realms so much, then scram from Earth. Don't live here. It's so annoying. Yu Hanji was so angry that her delicate body was trembling. No one had ever dared speak to her like this. Who hadn't been respectful to her since she left the North Pole Immortal Cave. Where's Lu Wuqing? Li Xinghe asked. He had no time to act at the moment and could no longer act amiable. His expression was so gloomy that it could drip water. Look over there. Chu Feng pointed hundreds of meters away. There was a human-shaped pile of ash there, and it looked fairly terrifying. So comfortable. I can't take it anymore. Chu Feng actually cried out. That was because the cellular activity in his body had increased to a terrifying degree. He felt that he could sever his 6th shackle at any moment. You deserve to die. Yu Hanji cried out. At the same time, she was terrified and couldn't help but retreat. Croak, croak, croak. It was at this time that the toad cried out and wanted to charge into the domains. Chu Feng guided it and changed the positions of the magnetic stones, allowing it to charge in successfully. With a swoosh, Yuhanji rushed toward the toad. She had heard from Chu Feng that he cared a lot about this mount and wouldn't give it up. She wanted to take the initiative and capture a captive. Bang! In the end, she had never expected that the toad would see the situation clearly after entering and no longer endure. It immediately jumped up and gave her a big slap. This strike sent Yuhanji flying, and one of her arms was almost broken. She was overwhelmed with shock. What kind of toad was this? I've tolerated you for a long time, the toad cried out loudly. It stood up and rushed over to chase after Yuhanji. Disgusting toad, you dare? Yuhanji rebuked. You're the toad. Your whole family are toads. This seat is a divine beast. I'll beat you to death. The toad attacked as fast as lightning. One had to know that it had fought Chu Feng for a long time back then. Its strength was terrifying. Yuhanji was immediately shaken to the point of coughing up blood. Her face was full of astonishment. She couldn't even defeat a toad? Was there still justice in this world? Cough. Additionally, the toad opened its mouth at this time and directly spat at Yuhanji. Within moments, it sprayed all over her face. Yuhanji screamed and trembled all over. She had goosebumps all over her body as she wiped her face with all her might. She was about to go crazy. I'm going to kill you. She was driven mad. Cough. The toad coughed and began to spit again. This time, it was like a torrential downpour. Large amounts of liquid sprayed out and drenched Yuhanji. This was a high-decibel scream. Yuhanji almost fainted from anger. This kind of experience was like a hellish torture. For a girl who loved beauty, this was the most terrifying torture. She couldn't bear it and retreated while trembling. She then began to retch until she was about to spit out bile. Bang! The toad slapped out with a true toad palm. It sent Yuhanji flying, and she fell to the ground with blood flowing from all 7 orifices. She was on the verge of death. In the end, it imitated Chu Feng and threw Yuhanji into the essence flames of extreme yang to burn her clean. Li Xinghe saw everything with his own eyes. Even though the temperature here was quite high, he was so scared that his hands and feet were ice cold. The toad that had come with them, and was being looked down upon, Chu Feng's mount, was actually so abnormal. It had easily finished off the powerful Yuhanji. Was there still justice in this world? Li Xinghe's vision turned dark and he almost fainted. He knew he was finished and his life was about to be forfeit. How can you be so powerful? He glanced at the toad and then at Chu Feng. Things had already come to this point. What else could he not understand? Chu Feng was definitely not crippled. This was a trap. He even dared to kill a descender's descendant. He would definitely kill him to silence him. Don't attack, I have something to say. Brother Chu. Li Xinghe wanted to converse with Chu Feng. In the end, he was sent tumbling into the essence flames of extreme yang and let out a miserable cry. His fate was predictable. It was at this time that Bird King Kai Ying arrived. She looked around the outer realm and wanted to enter. Chu Feng naturally wouldn't stop her and allowed her to enter successfully. You! She turned pale with fright. Feathered animal, you've been mocking and ridiculing us along the way and are even more unbridled after arriving here. You suggested killing me first. Now I'll roast you. The toad said coldly and then burst into laughter. Bang, 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 in a simple exchange, the toad beat Bird King Kai Ying into her true form and killed her on the spot. Li Xinghe's group was almost completely wiped out in just a short time. Only Su Mei was left outside and had no idea what was going on inside. Your luck is good enough. I'll leave you alive to continue our cooperation. Chu Feng glanced outside. How can we continue our cooperation if you've already killed them? The toad glanced sideways at him. I'm warning you, you're not allowed to look at me sideways. Chu Feng glared at it and said, "Who said I killed them? It's clearly because this place is dangerous and they accidentally entered the essence flames of extreme yang and were burned to death." "What essence flame pit? You're the one who tricked them to death." The toad slanted its eyes. "If you dare speak nonsense to slander me again, I'll roast you immediately." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.